Today is Monday, November 21st, and we are here today in the Ionella Chamber for a hearing on docket 0921, message in order to review the surveillance use policies from each city department or agency subject to the ordinance on surveillance oversight and information sharing. Boston City Code, Section 16-63, referred to the committee on August 10th, 2022, and sponsored by Mayor Wu. Good morning, Commissioner. The hearing is being recorded and it's being live streamed at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv and on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, FiOS 964. It will also be rebroadcast at a later date. Docket 0921 is the surveillance use policies of the Boston Police Department, the Parks and Park Rangers, Boston Public Schools, Boston Public Health Commission, Boston Housing Authority, Boston Municipal Protective Services, and the Office of Emergency Management, as required under the ordinance, which establishes standards for surveillance oversight and information sharing. The ordinance requires community involvement when surveillance is used and when the city acquires surveillance technology. The ordinance limits information sharing between Boston Public Schools and the Boston Police Department. The ordinance requires the mayor to establish a surveillance use policy that applies to every city department and that the city council approve that policy. If there are members here from the public that wish to provide public testimony, they can sign up at the sheet right as you come in the door. To my left as you walk in, and obviously just ask that you legibly print your name and any affiliation that you have. We also know that members of the public could email Christine O'Donnell at christine.o'donnell, ODONNELL@boston.gov to request a testimony link for public testimony via Zoom. Members of the public can also email the committee at ccc.ps@boston.gov to provide written testimony. I'd like to stress that we need information for people who are providing public testimony via video conference, especially if you are dialing in with a phone number or if you have an unrecognizable username. So please make sure that your name appears clearly on the Zoom. And also members of the public can also provide testimony via Zoom or provide written comments to the committee that will be made part of the public record and shared with the councilors. We are here today joined by order of their arrival, City Councilor Erin Murphy, City Council President Ed Flynn, and City Council at Large Ruth C. Louisiane. And good morning, Commissioner. It's good to see you. And I know you got a whole team here. And I know that you have a time sensitivity that I want to be respectful of. So with that, I'm just going to recognize, obviously, you as the Commissioner. We're also joined by Shemaine Benford, Chief Operator, Office of Emergency Management Superintendent, Felipe Colon, Bureau of Investigative Services, and then also there's folks that are here with us that are available to us for questions. Superintendent Marcus Eddings, Captain Timothy Conley, Bureau of Field Services, Lieutenant Detective Paul McLaughlin from the BRIC, Lieutenant Detective Patrick Cullity, Bureau of Investigative Services, Sergeant Detective Carl Belando, Bureau of Field Services, Sergeant Lou Madeira, Bureau of Administration and Technology, and Sean Romanowski, Bureau of Administration and Technology, to name a few, and I know that there are others here as well. And we also have a panel from the ACLU, that's Kate Crockford, Fatima Ahmad, and Alex Matthews. So without further ado, we're going to get right into it. Commissioner, if you can just offer opening comments and remarks, and my colleagues may have a couple quick questions, and we'll get you on your way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilor. Good morning.
And we're also joined by my colleague, City Councilor Brian Worrell, on my peripheral vision side. So good morning.
Good morning, Councilor. Good morning. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to discuss the important issues surrounding the use of technology, transparency, accountability, but most importantly, public safety. Above all, my main objective as police commissioner is to provide safety and security for the people of Boston. The police department is in the business of public safety. It's our duty to protect the public and to take this obligation seriously because this is our life's work. Additionally, with all we do, we are cognizant of honoring the constitutional rights of each and every individual we interact with. The department does not and will not support any means, including the use of any technology or collection or retention of information that would violate an individual's rights in any way. In support of our public safety mission, community policing is key. Community policing is about trust. It's about getting out in the community, listening to the community, and responding to the community and working and partnering with them. Effective community policing always starts with trust, and I believe hearings like this is a great tool to build that trust with the communities we all serve. It's crucial to listen to the community and understand their concerns and fears and get their input. Part of my job is educating the public. We must be certain that the factual information about what's happening in the city. The Boston Police must address crime as well as fear of crime, and we know the realities of the two are sometimes disconnected. We must do all we can to inform the public about what's actually happening by providing facts, and where there's reason for concern, we must provide solutions and work with the community to make them feel safe. Similarly with technology, we understand that there is fear and concern in technology that could be used inappropriately. Indeed, by enacting this ordinance, we're listening to the community and recognizing the need and opportunity for further transparency and accountability. Community members recognize that technology deployed inappropriately plays an important role in our ability to investigate and follow through the public safety to keep residents and officers safe. In particular, cameras in hotspot locations that have helped provide key information in addressing violence in our neighborhoods. For example, there was a recent homicide near a barbershop. During the press conference while I was there trying to talk to the media, there were quite a few people from the public, or at least an individual, that was demanding that, we can solve this quickly because everyone knows we have cameras there. We didn't have any cameras in that location, but yet the public had this expectation that we did, and if we had, it probably would have solved the crime a lot quicker. The department needs to and has an obligation to evolve and to innovate, to stay ahead of those who wish our community harm, and continue to update our technology and training. We must come together as community leaders and put aside jargon that takes on initiatives to modernize the department. We owe our community the use of every tool we have to fulfill our mandate and leave Boston a better and safer place. None of this is possible without our communities trusting the department will conduct all of the operations in a manner consistent with the Constitution and with specific focus on protection of both civil rights and civil liberties. This ordinance, through the annual reporting requirement, provides an opportunity for the department to track and publish data, which I'm confident will show just how vital technology we utilize is. The department participated in over several years in city council hearings to help shape the language in the ordinance. So I know councilors recognize that this is a transition, this transition is implemented. The level of specificity and detail called by this ordinance requires significant resources to compile and produce. We will continue to demonstrate transparency and work with all stakeholders to build trust in the department, just as we constantly update our training, work to address staffing shortage, improve health of our officers and well-being, to fully carry out the community policing embedded directly in a partnership with the residents. There have been many popular misconceptions about the size and capability of Boston Police surveillance portfolio. I want to clarify that many of the technologies that we submitted questionnaires for are only used when authorized by search warrants or emergency situations. Some of the technology we not only identify potential suspects and efficiently deploy resources, but also identify individuals who are at risk and needs of services. Technology is also vital in protecting our city from domestic extremist groups. Again, this is vital in the work we do to use every tool at our disposal to keep our city safe. We acknowledge and worry that concerns exist around technology and the idea of surveillance. To be clear, the department does not use technology for any general surveillance purposes or in violation of anyone's constitutional rights. This is not who we are, but rather technology is one tool that we employ strictly to fulfill our public safety mission for legitimate law enforcement purposes. Who we are as a department are hardworking, committed officers who daily strive to maintain the highest standards of honesty and integrity and are committed to building and strengthening trust with all the members of our community. All members of the Boston Police Department, both sworn and civilian, are committed to providing services and enforcing laws of professionalism, non-discriminatory, fair, and in an equitable manner. I look forward to working with all the community members to make Boston a safe and vibrant community where all our citizens can strive in peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We've also been joined by my colleague, City Councilor Kendra Lara, and also just received word from my colleague, City Councilor Ricardo Arroyo, who has a flat tire. He's in the process of trying to have that repaired, and will try to join us when he gets that fixed. Commissioner, would you like to introduce anyone in your team to continue with your opening remarks? So, Superintendent Felipe Colon from Bureau of Investigative Services, you have the floor.
Good morning. I'm Superintendent Felipe Colon, and I am the Chief of the Boston Police Department's Bureau of Investigative Services. I've been a Boston police officer for 29 years and have had a variety of roles and responsibilities throughout my career. The Bureau is responsible for investigating all types of crimes in an effort to hold offenders accountable, bring justice to victims, and prevent future crimes. The Bureau also plays a critical role in investigating ongoing and unfolding public safety emergencies, such as missing persons, kidnappings, or active shooters. The use of surveillance technology is a crucial tool that investigators use to save lives, solve crimes every day. The Boston Police Department values individual privacy rights and strives to balance these rights with public safety. We appreciate the Council's review and consideration of the Department's surveillance policies and look forward to discussing them with you at today's hearing. Hopefully, we can address any questions and concerns you may have regarding the policies and specific technologies. The Boston Police Department is committed to working with the Boston City Council for the safety and the security of Boston residents and visitors. And if I may add, with us today, several individuals from various bureaus that would hopefully aid in clarifying any questions that the Council may have.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. Either the Superintendent, Marcus Settings, or Shumane Benford, either of you have the floor at this time.
I'll defer and follow you.
Superintendent Marcus Settings, I'm assigned to the Office of the Police Commissioner. I'm here to assist the PC and Felipe Colon with any questions that they may have with regards to ShotSpotter.
Thank you, Superintendent. Shumane Benford, you have the floor. Chief.
Sure. Good morning. My comments here this morning will focus on the Office of Emergency Management and just a high-level overview of the MBHSR, which is the Metro Boston Homeland Security Region, which is the entity, excuse me, that manages and receives the UASC grant on behalf of the region. I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, the members, the full body, the OEM team, and my partners in city government and the MBHSR partners as well. With regards to emergency management, it is a City of Boston department. We operate the Emergency Operations Center and maintain the city's suite of emergency operations plans. We most recently worked with city partners and nonprofit partners in developing a response framework for the city's response to the migrant, the migrants coming into the city. And it is worthy to note that our department is 90% funded by the UASC grant. OEM serves as the fiduciary and administrative support to the MBHSR. We have a unique responsibility in executing contracts and supporting infrastructure that has force and effect in 8 other cities or towns outside of the City of Boston. So it is very unique in the mandate that we have as a fiduciary and an administrative support for the region. It's also important to note that we have no executive authority over the grant. I will, in later comments, you will see that there is a process for how funds are vetted as well as allocated to support different projects. With regards to the UASC grant, this has its roots in lessons learned shortly after 9/11 when we looked as a country at our posture and most importantly how we shared information. And this grant was stood up to help major metropolitan areas join in partnership with the federal government and other partners in executing and maintaining a readiness posture for the response and prevention to terrorist events in addition to others. This grant is administered out of the Department of Homeland Security, very specifically administered by FEMA. As I mentioned, it is designed to build capacity to prevent and respond to related acts of terrorism as well as man-made disasters. The threat landscape continues to evolve. Most specifically, we're dealing with and having conversations around domestic violence extremism, otherwise known as homegrown terrorism. I point that out because it's extremely difficult for local jurisdictions to have the capacity to pivot in many of these different areas as we look at the threat landscape. So it's extremely important that we have resources and access to different opportunities to build capacity and enable the police department and other public safety partners to be able to maintain our security posture. FEMA has 6 national priority areas when you think about the grant. And within those national priority areas, there are specific minimums that have to be dedicated to support those national priority areas. FEMA has 5 core mission areas. They are protection, prevention, response, recovery, and mitigation. As a department, OEM subscribes to those same mission areas, and all of our program is built around those 5 core areas. The congressional allocation for federal fiscal year 22 was for $615 million across the country. Boston received an allocation of $16.9 million. Of that $16.9 million, of the $615 million, the federal allocation requires, and the law requires, that the top 85th percentile of the top municipal statistical areas across the country receive that funding, and Boston is one of them. The MBHSR specifically, and as I mentioned, that is the legal entity that receives the grant and manages it on behalf of the region. Boston is the core city, but it is joined by 8 other jurisdictions: Cambridge, Quincy, Revere, Somerville, Brookline, Everett, Chelsea, and Winthrop. The jurisdictional points of contact, otherwise known as the JPOCs, make the funding decisions as it relates to resources and how they're allocated across the region. Recommendations to help inform the decisions come from subject matter experts that occupy subcommittees that debate and have realistic and very real conversations about where those fundings allocations should go and what the recommendations should be to the JPOCs. And there are some processes that the federal government has outlined that should help guide those conversations and those decisions. Routine partners include fire, police, emergency management, and public health. And it should be noted, as I mentioned earlier, this is not a grant that is designed to support only Boston. It is a regional grant that supports the region, and it is designed to build regional capacity. Our allocation for fiscal year 22, as I mentioned, is $16.9 million. The application is submitted to the state as the state administrative agent, and they submit the application to the federal government. I mentioned earlier 6 national priority areas. Of these 6 national priority areas, 30% of that funding is required to support these national priority areas. Within that framework, 12% of that funding has to go to 4 specific areas, and I will name them. Soft targets and crowded spaces must require and must be supported by no less than 3%. A good example of that is the recently renovated City Hall Plaza. Information and intelligence sharing, 3%. Another functional example includes the marathon, our planning for the marathon and response to the marathon. Elections, supporting our major universities with commencements. First night, and crisis events like mass shootings, where we do have very strong partnerships across the country. We're able to reach out to peer cities so that we understand, again, that evolving and moving threat landscape. Domestic violence extremism, 3%. These represent groups with extreme views. We also, as a city, which was led by EMS, recently hosted a domestic violence extremism symposium and training here in the city of Boston, where we saw individuals come from all over the world and all over the country to come into Boston to share and exchange ideas and share information about how we collectively can increase our security posture. Community preparedness and resilience. This really ties in the governmental response and how we build relationships and transparency with our communities. How do we engender and bring in the community as partners, and how we deliver services to them? Cybersecurity, which does not have a minimum, and election security, which are closely tied together with cybersecurity. What has happened in that space is the CISA, which again is under DHS, has the primary responsibility for outlining the federal cybersecurity response agenda. So that's why you don't see those minimum days. and I'm almost to the end of my comments, sir, with regards to the Metro Boston Homeland Security Region, there are 9 goal areas, and all of our programming and projects supported fall into these 9 goal areas. It's important to note when we think about this grant and when we think about these resources, when the pandemic hit, it was this grant that identified and was able to support the first round of PPE that allowed all of our public safety professionals to stay in service to our communities. Vital equipment for securing buildings, to include City Hall, have received resources to help strengthen the posture of this building. Equipment procured with this grant also helped us last summer when we had early spats of unfortunate drownings across our city and in our region. Helpful equipment was helpful in locating the remains and bringing some closure to the families. There are also resources in there that have been allocated through one of the national priority areas, namely community preparedness and resilience, that has helped us build a posture where we're going to be able to build out a community volunteer corps program which will help augment and support our city. And most recently, we think about migrants. We think about the response in a dignified way by our city and our region for individuals seeking support in the democracy that has helped to make this country the great country that it is. Those funds and those resources are helping us ensure that we have cots and we have pillows and we have other resources at the low ready so that we can assist the city in its response. I want to close by mentioning that there are multiple checks and balances that we have in terms of the process for allocating funds. There are monthly public meetings that are held. The state serves as the administrative oversight agent, and all of the resources that are allocated go through that process where there is additional oversight at the state level. There is FEMA Federal Region 1, which is based in our city, which is the local attachment of FEMA. And then finally, there is FEMA headquarters. I want to close by mentioning this body, i.e. The Metro Boston Homeland Security Region, heard the pleas from the social movement and the social advocacy around transparency, as the Commissioner mentioned, around ways in which we can be more transparent and we can partner not only with advocates but with our city and our residents on being more transparent with how we deliver services. And it was the MBHSR that adopted a policy around the camera network so that it was a strengthened document, and it did help to support the trust that we need to build with our communities in how we use this equipment and technology. Lastly, sir, transparency is at the top of all of our agendas. We want to work closely with all of our partners, both in city government and the private sector, in ensuring that the work that we do is transparent, and we welcome the opportunity to have the difficult conversations in arriving at a place that is more just, more equitable for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Benford. Obviously, thank you to the administration, superintendent, commissioner, obviously superintendent, and everyone's here to engage in questions. Commissioner, I know you have a time sensitivity. You are excused at this point, as long as you're leaving a very capable team to answer questions of my colleagues. But as always, good to see you. Appreciate the work you do and look forward to continued partnership. Thank you. Appreciate you being here.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So whether it's a chief or a superintendent, I'd like to start with the community involvement component. If you could share with me as sort of this was coming together, really just 2 focuses for me would be the ordinance list some exemptions. Are there any provisions in the ordinance that hampers public safety? And those are those spots that you talked about, whether it's a parade or a marathon, et cetera. Is the department comfortable with that we're not leaving ourselves vulnerable, if you will? And then also just dive into the community involvement component of sort of putting this together.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. Was that for me or was that for the super? I'm sorry.
So the first part for me is this ordinance lists
Yes,
some exemptions. Is there any provision in this ordinance that hampers public safety from your viewpoint? And again, we were home to September 11th with 2 planes
Sure.
coming out of Logan. We've experienced the marathon bombing, and there's been a number of incidents over the years. So is there anything in this ordinance that hampers public safety? Number 1. 2, can you describe the community involvement component of putting this ordinance together?
So I guess I would start off that the ordinance was a major task, and putting this ordinance together with finite resources, finite time constraints. You know, we had lawyers spend several hours, I mean, hundreds of hours trying to compile this information for this submission. If there are exemptions, I guess if I'm following the question correctly, I believe that that disclosing too much information could jeopardize public safety, and it could also jeopardize ongoing investigations. As to the marathon, I want to defer to the chief, but that's what I would.
Very good, thanks. Chief, you had mentioned sort of soft, what was the word you used?
Soft target, sir?
Soft target, so anything in this ordinance that ties our hands on soft targets?
There is nothing that ties our hands. What I would like to say is I think the opportunity for us to continue to engage in conversations that are reasonable and balanced around the need to maintain our security posture while being transparent is really what I would advocate for ruling the day. As I mentioned in my comments, we're committed to transparency, but we can't deny that we want to and need to secure our city. So doing it in a transparent way in partnership with all the different respective stakeholders is the appropriate pathway.
And then can you describe to me the community involvement component of this ordinance from your perspective?
Sure, the community, I mean, you know, it's clear, right? You know, the advocacy was on behalf of the community in ensuring that they have an opportunity to be heard and an opportunity and space to understand the technology. So I think working in partnership where we can get outside of these silos and really have reasonable conversations, I think that there is a pathway to balance both. But I do want to underscore that, you know, maintaining our security posture while doing it in a way that is respectful of the public's rights is where we need to be on this space.
Thank you, Chief. In order of arrival, Councilor Erin Murphy, any questions of the administration panel?
Just one thing. Thank you, and thank you for being here. I do appreciate your professional ability to balance the safety and the personal rights and what I heard, and I know I've talked to the Brick and others beforehand, though, but I kept hearing from just the short time we've been here is transparency, trust, educate, and communicate from all of you, so I appreciate that. And also, as a resident, know too, when I'm watching the TV, the example that the commissioner gave and how much you can provide in facts and how much does with social media and how fast things travel nowadays, can we keep you know, the residents educated, but at the same time keeping you guys being able to do your job. And also that, you know, we want to use every tool we have to keep our residents safe, but at the same time also never violate anyone's constitutional rights. So I do appreciate that that was said time and time again. I visited the Brick. It was very informative. I definitely left there with a better understanding of what the Brick does. I thought I knew, right? But it's when I did the ride along with the police, you think you know, but until you actually go and do it, you learn a lot more. I would highly recommend, if my colleagues haven't, to do that. It was very informative. My one question is about Ring doorbells. When people have their own personal surveillance cameras on their doors, are you able to use them when it comes to a crime or something if it happens in the neighborhood?
So yes, in addition to the cameras that we own and the cameras that we access through the city of Boston, whenever there is a crime, we do a canvass of the neighborhood for witnesses as well as any type of video surveillance. And oftentimes we do come across folks that have Ring doorbells that are very, very accommodating and want to cooperate. And let's be real, there's fear out there. There's fear in these communities, and folks do not want to appear that they're working with the police for fear of reprisal. So oftentimes we will be met with resistance, but if it's pivotal to a crime, to let's say a homicide, then we will seek a warrant to get that information, to get that footage. But by and large, we have folks in many communities that have these Ring doorbells and who are often very, very receptive to cooperating with us and often calling us. When we go to scenes, we constantly make a plea to the public. We need your help, and we constantly get information relative to these surveillance footage, and it is turned over.
Thank you. That's all, Chair.
Thank you, Council Murphy. Chair recognizes City Council President Ed Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the professional Boston Police Department that is here with us. Thank you for the work that you're doing as well across the city, across our neighborhoods. The police commissioner highlighted some important facts and points that he made, but he mentioned, and I agree with him, that transparency is critical, but public safety is as important, making sure our residents are safe. As a district city councilor, I could not agree with them more. Our job as district councilors, and certainly at-large councilors, is making sure we have the necessary resources in our communities to make sure that residents are safe, especially our seniors, persons with disabilities. When I'm at community meetings, the first person that would usually speak at a community meeting is the captain or the community service officer, and I would speak after. The captain would give a briefing on crime stats. And the police and the community would always say to the captain and to myself after, Councilor Flynn or Captain Sweeney, we need more police. We need more resources. We respect the role the police are playing, but we need more help. We need more police on the street. We need more police in the parks. They're doing an exceptional job, but we don't have enough. That's one point. And the second point I wanted to highlight is Boston. It's a global city. People come from all over the world, and we need the tools and the resources to protect our city, to protect our residents, and to work with our partners in cities and towns across Greater Boston to make sure they're protected as well. So certainly it's a balancing act. Certainly there's transparency, which we all respect, in civil rights, which we all respect as well. But public safety has to be a critical component of this debate. So I guess my question is, if any of these, if anything is implemented, are we placing anything? Are we impacting public safety at all by making any of these goals as part of our policy? Are we hampering any efforts public safety-wise to do our job? What impact will any of these recommendations have on public safety, keeping our residents safe?
Sir, thank you for the question. Yes, my answer would be that this surveillance ordinance has hampered our response to the community, to public safety, to emergency situations that are happening in the district. And what I would say is that we do believe in transparency. I appreciate, and the department appreciates, the want of information. Folks in the community, we constantly, through our CSO office, through our investigative bureau, any contact we have with the public, we try to educate, and we need to continue doing that. We need to continue to educate the department. But again, disclosing too much information, putting constraints on our capabilities will definitely hamper the service that we can provide to the public. I will say this, and in regards to the question earlier as well, the Ring doorbell. Just recently, we had a shooting over at 92 Westview Street. Because of BAT cameras, because of some Ring doorbell cameras, we were able to bring an individual to justice within 6 hours. I believe it was even quicker. But it was being able to draw from that technology, and to be able to communicate with our partners and get that information out. We removed a dangerous individual from the streets of Boston. So, yes, we believe in transparency, we believe in accountability, but again, there's only so much information that we should be held to disclose in order so so that we don't jeopardize public safety as well as any ongoing investigations.
Thank you, Superintendent. And, you know, I'm not going to support any type of policy that reduces the tools the Boston Police can do to protect our citizens. My job as a district city councilor is I'm in the public safety business as well, and I take that responsibility very seriously. I also take transparency seriously as well. But my number one job, as the police commissioner mentioned, is public safety. And Mr. Chair, I can't support any type of policy that limits the Boston Police to do their job effectively and keep our residents safe. Is there a way, and I ask this openly, is there a way that we can come to any type of conclusion where public safety is not jeopardized, and we certainly, and having that same transparency? I guess that's the question, but I could not support any type of policy that limits the services of the Boston Police protecting our residents. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council President. Chair recognizes City Councilor Elijah Ruzzi. Louisiana.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn, Flaherty, and I want to thank everyone for being here. Councilor Flaherty had mentioned the importance of community involvement in the ordinance, which I think was really great and important, but we are now at this stage where we're reviewing the surveillance use policies and a 400-plus page appendix that outlines the surveillance use policies, and I'm curious to know about the community involvement there, which is a big component of the ordinance. So what, if any, community involvement was there in sort of putting together these surveillance use policies?
I can't speak to the specificity of the community involvement, but I will say that we are, as my colleague mentioned earlier, we have heard the community. We listen to the community. We're at community meetings weekly. I would argue we attend a lot of community staff, command staff members attend these meetings. So we have heard the community. We've brought that back, and that was implemented to the exact. I cannot give you exactly how their exact involvement for the policies. But again, we understand the community. We're in these communities daily, and I go into the communities and I stay active to hear exactly what people in the communities that I used to live in, that I lived in, are the wants that they have. But I will say, perception is everything. Folks in the community do not understand our technological capabilities. I think sometimes they compare it to what they've seen on TV. So again, it goes back to education. It goes back to us educating folks in the community and having these candid conversations as to what we're really capable of and what exactly we can do and cannot do. So again, education is huge, but we will continue to work with the community. We will continue to hear the community. But again, education, and I think we need to educate others in the community, our partners, that they understand exactly what we do, how we use this, and the parameters that we have in place to make sure that there's no misuse of the technology that we have.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm in these communities as well, and I think it is really important that we educate and have community involvement. Grew up in Mattapan and Hyde Park, live right on the border of those two neighborhoods right now, and I know that folks, right, like you watch whatever it is, CSI, and you think that these are the capabilities. I think it's really important that we spell out for people what the capabilities are. I've heard several people here on the panel talk about how we're not infringing on folks' individual civil rights. And for me personally, as a city councilor, my duty and my responsibility is to make sure that there's community input in line with section 16-63.3, community control over surveillance. And so I think it's really important that these policies be brought out and be explained to community members to really hear their input, because I think a lot of folks would take issue, myself included, with the idea that BPD is cognizant of not infringing on the civil rights and liberties of individuals, as an en banc court of the First Circuit decided, which is rare to bring all judges together for an en banc decision that really called into question the gang database and its usage and its applicability. And so, and it's listed here as number 16 in the table of content surveillance use policies. So it's really important for me that we do have a community voice and that I have a better understanding as a city councilor of where the community voice and input is here on these surveillance use policies. Because as was stated and as folks have seen with the gang database that over-identifies and over-criminalizes black and brown folks, it's really important that we are approving surveillance use technologies that are really going to advance public safety, which is what we all care about. All of us, every single city councilor here cares deeply about safe neighborhoods, but not to the detriment of over-criminalization of folks who need not have any interaction with the criminal legal system. So I'm curious as to what your assessment of the gang database is under this current surveillance use policy.
So what I can tell you, and again, I would ask you, as Councilor Murphy stated earlier, I would invite you to come to the BRIC so that you can get a better understanding as to what the BRIC does in the gang database.
I've been to the BRIC.
You've been?
I have been.
Okay, so
thank
then,
you.
so we need more city councilors to come to come and understand exactly what our capabilities are, so you can help us educate the public. In terms of
And when I say educate, you're using the word educate the public, and I think it is important, but it's not just a one-way stream of us educating the public. It's also about hearing input from the public about what's working and what's not working. And we've heard repeatedly from community, from federal judges, that as it is programmed, the gang database is a surveillance use policy that is not working in the way that it's over-identifying people as part of the database. So education isn't just about coming from government to people, it's really about listening to people and having that be part of the cycle of information of how we do things and how we operate, whether at the BPD or the city council. It's not just this top-down approach. I just think that's really important to reinforce here.
No, and I understand. And I will say that that I will argue that the gang database is invaluable. I can, off the top of my head, give you several cases in where the gang database assisted us in solving some pretty serious crimes. But I'm going to invite Lieutenant Detective Paul McLaughlin to answer further questions on the gang database.
Okay, thank you.
Morning, Paul.
Can I address
Yes, you can.
Councilor?
If you could just state your name and title.
Yes, my name is Paul
affiliation.
McLaughlin. I'm a lieutenant with the Boston Police Department.
It's Councilor Louis Jen, just to help. Louis, like Louis Vuitton bag, your friend Jen, Louis Jen.
Thank you. Again, I am the commander of the homicide unit currently. Up until January of this year, I was a sergeant detective assigned to the BRIC for about 7 years. In my responsibilities as the sergeant detective and the supervisor of the criminal intelligence section of the BRIC, one of my main responsibilities was dealing with the gang database, dealing with all of the issues around the gang database, the rewriting of Rule 335, and trying to really proactively look at the gang database, listen to the criticisms that have been made by many people, including people within this body, and try to make it a tool that both balances some of the concerns that you mentioned, Councilor, as well as continues to provide us with a framework from which we can work as a department to recognize the groups that are involved in driving violence in the city and to recognize the people within those groups that are driving the violence within the city. Oftentimes retaliatory and targeted violence that involves the dynamics between different groups. So I recognize that. One of the things, as you mentioned, that particular case, that one case that came out of the federal court,
Non-bank, non-bank First Circuit Court, yeah.
First Circuit, I'm sorry. That particular case, originally, when it was first decided, the ruling was in favor of deportation, I guess, is how you would say it. And in that decision, which came out in, I think, 2018 or 19, there was a dissenting opinion that was critical of the gang database and the process in general, not just the database. We at the BRIC had that decision before it was decided in 2022, and we looked at that and we were very critical and self-assessed ourselves and our database to try to look for where the points that were made within that dissenting opinion, and now currently in the when it was overturned, how we could assess our database, make it better, address some of those issues. One of the key points in that decision was the idea that, yes, one of the things that we would say is that that was never an intention for the people that formed the gang database. That was never an intention of theirs, that those documents would be used to cross-examine a person who's about to be deported. That was no intention. That was an unintended consequence which we've addressed. But one of the things that was said in that was and they were very clear on, as I read it, and I am not an attorney, but as I read it, was that one of the issues was that they presented documents without without backup by the people that actually made observations, by the people that actually were out on the street that provided that information. And that had that information come along, it would not have been the database, it would have been a human being. And so we've tried to mix that human analysis of what we do in the database. We've tried to strengthen that. We looked at the idea that associative evidence, if you will, of people associating with each other alone, which we could oftentimes we'll talk about FIOs. That we've looked at that as we reassess the database to make sure that we did not use that as a sole criteria in putting people into the gang database. We recognize that that could potentially be a faulty way of looking at things. And in our rewrite of the rule in 2021, we addressed that as one of our primary issues as we look to verify people in the database.
Are you still using, is it still using a point system?
I'm sorry?
Is it still using a point system?
Yes, we are still using the point system.
Can individuals find out if they're in the gang database?
There was a redress for people in the gang database within the policy, the BRIC.
Am I able to
policy.
call someone and say, is my name in the gang database?
There is a mechanism within the privacy policy of the BRIC to do that.
Is there a mechanism to appeal one's presence on the gang database?
Again, Counsel, within the, I don't have the wording in front of me exactly how it is, but it's in the privacy policy. There's a redress to questioning not just the gang database, but inclusion in any kind of database.
And does it include folks who are under the age of 18 in the database?
The gang database has a small number of people under the age of 18, yes.
Okay, see, I appreciate the answer to this question. I just think that there's a lot more work for us to do here to really understand and for the public to have input and time to really review these surveillance use policies. I do have a few more questions just about this list in general. It says for Boston Housing Authority, it says body-worn cameras, but it doesn't say any BHA cameras. Does that mean that they're currently on BHA properties, there are no cameras that are being used?
Counsel, I wouldn't have the capability to answer that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat
So
the
we
question?
have this table of contents for this, what the surveillance use policy covers. And under Boston Housing Authority, for example, it says body-worn cameras, but it doesn't say anything about any other cameras. I'm not sure if this panel has that information, but I just want to make sure that this is an exhaustive list. Is it possible that there are things missing, that are technologies that are missing from different departments by the city that are not included on this list?
So I may be able to jump in.
Yes.
So I would just mention, ma'am, that the Boston Housing Authority does have a video surveillance camera system that they use in all their communities. And the small police department that they have is going to be utilizing body-worn camera technology in the near future, but that has not been implemented. But they do have video surveillance technology that they use as part of their security posture within the developments.
Thank you. A fear of mine is that this list is incomplete in terms of the surveillance use technology that exists, both from things that are missing from BHA, BPHC, and there's more in the appendix. There's a list of additional databases with no intel in terms of how they're being used. So I just think that there's some more work here that we have to do in order to fully understand and get understand the full landscape of the surveillance use technologies that exist to make sure that we're not infringing, that we are doing our best, because we do infringe, but we're doing our best to prevent infringement on individual liberty. So I have one more question that
if I could just
Go ahead.
interrupt for 1 second. We could speak for the body-worn cameras for the Boston Police Department, and as the chief just spoke
Yeah,
for
that's
VHA.
why I figured that you
But
may not be
as
able
to
to.
the non-exhaustive list, given the time And again, we go back to the resources, it's virtually impossible to give you all that information. So with that being said, I think we did a great job providing the capabilities, the technological capabilities that we have. But I will add that when you keep mentioning the word infringe, we do have a robust policies, rules, and regulations that don't only guide and govern. They guide and govern our conduct, but it also applies to the technology. It also applies to the usage of technology. So I just thought that you should know that.
I appreciate that, which is also why, because this list is non-exhaustive, in order for me to do my job as a city councilor, I need to know what's missing, and we need to have those community conversations, so I appreciate that. Again, there's more information in the appendices that spark more questions that hopefully we'll be able to have a hearing on and talk about more, but how this information is shared between different agencies and how it's shared regionally is questions I have for concern, but I think I've taken up a lot of the mic, and I'm going to pass it on to my colleagues, but I want to thank everyone for being here and for your attentiveness to my question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Chair recognizes City Councilor Brian Worrell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to everyone here today. And similar to my colleagues, you know, when I go to the community meetings, safety is one of the top priorities. So thank you for all your hard work. And I appreciate, you know, you guys stepping up and, you know, stepping into, you know, more community policing in our neighborhood. But similar to Councilor Louis Jen, one of my questions is, how can you ensure that residents, that the cameras are being used for safety instead of like over-policing and over-profiling of neighborhoods? And then also, how are we creating space? You could continuously talk about education. How are we creating space to have those conversations between the community to inform them on the benefits and the impacts, and to hear back from them on the impacts that they're going through when it comes to surveillance technologies?
So the first part of your question, which cameras were you referring to? Or just cameras?
Just cameras, right.
So again, we have, again, a robust policies, rules and regulations, right, that again govern exactly what we do. But in addition to that, we have oversight from supervisors, and not only supervisors, the officers, their peers. You know, if anybody misuses a piece of technology, or and they're doing it outside the scope of what it's intended for, well, they're subject to discipline. They're going to be subject to the rules and regulations and discipline. And again, I will go back, community policing is nothing new to us. We've been doing this since I came on. That's 29 years ago. And again, I'm a superintendent in the investigative world, and I'm still involved in the communities. I still go out, and I do create, and we do create the space to have these conversations with the public. And that's why I'm amazed each time I go out, the misconceptions that the public have because of other folks taking a platform and giving them false information. So we spend a lot of time correcting that false information. So we will, I will tell you that we're going to continue, and we're going to just do better to go out and create additional space and have these forums where we can continue to set the record straight and give the right information.
Thank you. And yeah, when you do create those spaces, I would love to know about them so I can help, you know, amplify in my community to bring, you know, our community voices to those spaces and to those forums. But yeah, other than that, Chair, no further questions.
Could I just add on the back of that, Mr. Chair?
Chief.
I would just add, certainly from the OEM perspective, and it's very small there, I think this represents a clear intersection where greater relationships can help build those pathways, right, for that transparency that you talk about. So I think that there are opportunities to continue the conversation where we can rely on the great relationships that the district and at-large city councilors have with your constituents in partnering with OEM and others to be able to build greater pathways and greater space for these conversations to be happening. So I know that there are historical barriers with different groups, but there are also opportunities for great partnerships between you and others that work in this space to build, be able to build greater transparency.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Chair recognizes City Councilor Kendra Lara. Pick up right when you start talking. Yeah, right when you start, I'll pick up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. First off, thank you to the members of the Boston Police Department for not only being here today, but for the incredible amount of work and labor. This is no small feat. It's no small document. There are hundreds of pages. And, you know, I would like to speak for myself, but have only been able to get through half since you've sent it because of the amount of information that is on there. So capacity, I want to talk a little bit about capacity because capacity, Superintendent, is an issue that you've brought up during your testimony a couple of times. Can you share with me how many people were working on providing this information to the City Council?
So we had 2 lawyers that, again, worked hundreds of hours, but in addition to that, they worked collectively with various members of the bureaus. So the entire department, every bureau gave input and was working closely with with the 2 attorneys, in addition to the work that we have to undertake on a daily basis.
In addition to your regular job, you
Yes.
also had to give us all of this. And so now, Councilor Louisiane brought up a little bit about the concern about this not being an exhaustive list. And so you have shared very clearly with us that with the time that you were given and the amount of information that is requested from this ordinance, it is difficult to make an exhaustive list. Now, from what I've reviewed, there are things that the ordinance requires that are missing from the report. So, given the time that we have had and the time that you've already used, how much time do you think you need to get us the information that the ordinance actually requires?
Ma'am,
And this is specifically for the Boston Police Department because I want to be clear just for the people who are watching the hearing is that this surveillance oversight ordinance applies to 7 other city departments. And so we're only talking to the Boston Police Department here, but it does apply to 7 other departments. And so for the Boston Police Department to get us the rest of the information that's missing from the report, how much time do you think you would need?
I would say, in terms of time, I cannot give you that exact number, but first of all, I want to
No,
say,
not exactly.
I want to thank the attorneys and everyone on this panel and the folks within the department that helped compile that. I believe it was 800 pages that we were able to submit. And again, I believe that they did an excellent job in giving our capabilities. It was in categories of devices, but the capabilities that we possess. In terms of if you have specific questions for specific items that you're saying are missing, if you would provide us with those questions, we will get that back in writing. As to the actual time frame, I cannot give you that, but I can assure you that we'll respond in writing.
Okay, thank you. And I will submit that request through the chair, but take the time that you need, right? I'm not, this is in no way trying to rush or get you to do more than you're already doing. I want to share a little bit about the council on our end in terms of capacity, because it's not just the Boston Police Department. We started our year with our budget season, and then we went into making decisions about where the ARPA funding was going to go, and then immediately went into a redistricting process. There are 13 city councilors. If you ask my colleagues, I am sure, if they have reviewed every page of the 800 pages that were submitted to us, it would be a very small number that would say yes to you. Now, given your capacity and given our capacity, right, I'm trying to instill some sort of shared responsibility here. We have not done our job to look at these, like the surveillance oversight policies as a collective. And we're only going to do this once, right? I know it's a heavy load. I know that it's much more work than you have the capacity to do in your department, but we are only going to do this once because after we see these and after we review these, you're only going to give us, yearly updates if anything new changes or you purchase any new technology. And so I wanted to highlight that because I think that it's important that we go through a proper process because we're only going to go through this process once. And so some of my colleagues have brought up community engagement. Some of my colleagues, which you have had community conversations, I don't think that this council has created enough time, especially, this is the first hearing, it's November, right before the holidays, and we're having a hearing at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, right? So when we're talking about community engagement, I don't think that we've done our job in terms of making sure that not only the council, but the people of the city of Boston have reviewed these policies and had time to give us, the people who represent them, feedback about what they would like to see. So I just wanted to be clear about where I think we are. I just don't think that we're ready. I think we need much more time to review these. Chief, you offered that you believe that, excuse me, Superintendent, I think you said that you believe that sharing too much information could or has jeopardized public safety. Do you feel like the ordinance currently requires you to share too much information?
I think I think trying to interpret this ordinance and give a proper response, that's where the confusion is the interpretation. So as I interpret it, yes, we're revealing too much information. Whether it be equipment that we may have, I do believe that for us to function and to be able to provide service to the community and public safety, enhance public safety, there's certain things that we can't give the blueprint to everything. I do agree, we need to have those conversations, and I do believe that people have the right to know what we're in broad, what we're capable of. But again, I will reiterate, conversations will clarify misconceptions. So I think it has to be conversations amongst all the partners and with the community.
I would like to make a formal request through the chair that the Boston Police Department share with the City Council what places in the ordinance. Like if you were to say, hey, this is a bit much, I think that this is, I would like to know, right? I would like to know, not vaguely, but I would like to know explicitly, and I would like that information from you, because I'm not a police officer. And so I don't know what in the ordinance could possibly be jeopardizing public safety. And so I would like for you to tell me so that I am aware of the instances in the ordinance where we might be jeopardizing public safety or asking you to share too much information. The Chief, now you made a comment about the need to maintain our security posture. And I think it's a similar question for you. There are, Chair Flaherty mentioned that there are exceptions in the ordinance. And so do you think that the exceptions that are currently in the ordinance are not meeting the need for us to maintain our security posture?
Thank you for the question. I think it provides some flexibility, but when we think about, and this is speaking purely through an OEM lens, when you think about our mandate and our responsibility to not only the City of Boston, but the region that we support, there are some challenges that we have to confront because there are 8 other jurisdictions that we support through that partnership. So I think that's where I think that there could be an opportunity to have a greater conversation. The superintendent mentioned it about interpretation. I think that I can recall some of the early debate on the passage of the ordinance. That there's some area and there's some flexibility in there, but I can tell you that I spend equally as much time in conversations with our partners from other jurisdictions that are party to the region around the concerns with decisions made by the council and or the city and the impacts on the region. And that's why I mentioned it's a regional grant and a regional posture. So I think that there's an opportunity here, ma'am, and I appreciate your candidness in talking about being ready in the appropriate time. I think there's an opportunity for us to look at that through a clearer lens and see how do we strike that balance of transparency and accountability, but also recognizing our mandate and responsibility to others.
And so it seems like there might be some useful exceptions in terms of the regional lens of with the other folks, the other cities that we work with.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so I would also make the same request that I would love to see what other exceptions you think are necessary in the ordinance. That would be helpful to you. I'm sorry, Councilor Flaherty, I have one last question. There was a conversation here about the Ring doorbell. It's come up 3 times already. Do you feel like this ordinance, and you told this very specific story about being able to get someone off the streets in 6 hours because of the footage, do you feel like this ordinance stopped you from getting a warrant and retrieving that footage on that video? Because we were talking about this ordinance, and so you told the story in relation to this, and so did this ordinance somehow stop you from getting the footage?
No, we got the footage, and again, that was through compliance from the owner, but I think overall, the ordinance, again, interpreting this ordinance and speaking with other folks who have gone through ordinance, it's the interpretation, the understanding of what exactly are we capable of doing without violating the ordinance. And it's an evolving process. We're going to continue to learn.
Yep.
And then, again, we'll continue to educate. But again, we're still trying to comprehend and learn exactly what is expected of the ordinance.
Okay. And so you didn't have to get a warrant for this because the person, I would be hard pressed to find someone who you would call and say, hey, there was a crime on your street and you have some Ring doorbell. I would say no, right? Like I would be hard pressed to feel like that you would, unless, that would be your take?
You would be hard pressed for what now?
I would think and I would be hard pressed, that we would be hard pressed to find someone who, if you were to call and say there was a shooting outside of your home, somebody was murdered, and we think that there might be surveillance on your Ring camera, do you find that people usually say yes to you, or that you have to get a warrant most of the time?
No, we find people that say yes, we do. But then oftentimes, again, as I mentioned earlier, because of fear of reprisal and fear of what might be viewed as working with the police,
Yep.
then
But that is not impacted by this ordinance.
again, I'm still trying to understand this ordinance.
Got it. So
And-
there is a question about the clarity, and I've heard this twice now from two of you, that interpreting the ordinance, and so clarity in the ordinance, being clear about what we're asking for, where there is flexibility, would also be helpful to the Boston Police Department too.
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. No further questions, Chair.
Thank you. We've also been joined by City Council Julie Mejia. Councilwoman Mejia, you have the floor.
Oh, yep.
There we go. Thank you. I apologize for my late arrival and thank the chair for allowing me to just ask a few questions, and thank you all for being here. And I'm just catching up, and I do appreciate Councilor Lada's acknowledgement that there's shared accountability across both. And I have yet to dive into the 800-page document. But I do have some questions in regards to how the department prioritized which elements you were going to dive into in terms of providing content to us. Like, how did you guys determine what information you were going to share with us or not share with us?
Again, as I mentioned earlier, I think we did the best we could in comprehending what was being asked of us, and we tried to put what we felt was a list that accurately reported what capabilities we have, right? The technological capabilities. I don't think I would say probably it was probably prioritized with some of the more topics that are discussed on a daily basis, the game database or the cell site simulator. So probably that was given priority. But again, I think what we tried to do was comprehend what was being asked and then give you a report as accurate as possible of what we're capable of. Again, it's non-exhaustive, as you can see. And again, I will argue that's virtually impossible to do in the time that we were allotted and then the resources that we have. So.
And what would you say would make your efforts easier? You said it was difficult, right? So then I'm just curious about what capacity you need to build to be able to deliver.
I would say clearly more time and more funds. But again, if we look at what we've discussed earlier, that again, we appreciate transparency and accountability, and we want folks to know exactly how is the police department's operating. But we have mechanisms in place that kind of guide and guide us in the way we conduct ourselves. But in addition to that, there's other, there's oversight from superior officers, there's oversight from their own peers. But some of the information that we've given you in terms of, if we're speaking on oversight, there's also judicial review. Most of this, as the commissioner mentioned earlier, most of this technology that we use is pursuant to a search warrant. And again, so there's judicial review there. And if there's misuse, well, then there's discipline. Folks are going to be subject to discipline. But I guess to answer your question, we would need a lot of time and some funding. But again, we've got to be, as Councilor Lara asked, is understanding what's being asked. And, and again, if you have some specific questions to certain equipment that we may have that's not listed there, if we would ask the question and we'll get to that in writing.
And can you talk to me a little bit about what you know about other cities across the country that have entered in these sort of ordinances? What have you learned, if anything, to help our department get up to speed?
Well, I can say that there are certain departments that have initially gone down this road with the surveillance ordinance, and it was very stringent. And those departments are now realizing that they have to kind of come back a little bit because of the, in terms of the crime that's happening and their inability to operate with the technology that they have or that they once had. So there are some real issues that I've seen across the country, and I do believe that people are trying to correct that and trying to find a balance. Again, I don't believe anyone is against transparency and accountability, but if it's too stringent and it hampers the police department from doing the work, and then that means the community is going to suffer. That means the folks that are suffering, the pain and trauma is in the community, and that we can't have. You know, we've seen a slight uptick in crime in certain parts of our neighborhoods, and we're going to address that. We'll continue to address that, but we cannot let that spiral out of control. We cannot let the ability not to use some of our technology to combat against the crimes and other public emergencies. We just can't let that happen here.
So let's talk a little bit about, you just mentioned community. I'm curious about your community engagement efforts. Walk me through that.
In what sense?
In the sense of just, I don't know, I believe that where there's a will, there's a way, right? And I tend to have a can-do attitude, right? So if we propose something, it is because we believe that the impact of that will lead us into a more transparent and accountable way of functioning. So I struggle with the notion that making the correlation between the uptick in violence and your inability, I guess, to be able to have access to the toys that you need to be able to execute. So can you just walk me through what your community engagement process looks like in regards to dealing with that quote-unquote uptick in violence?
So when I was saying the uptick, we're experiencing a slight uptick in violence here in certain areas. And again, we've done a tremendous job. And again, these are ongoing investigations, but we've done a tremendous job in outreach into the community, listening to the community, because they're going to tell you, right, if you get to the right space, they're going to tell you exactly what's happening, or some people will share that information. So we're going to constantly do that. The Boston Police Department, throughout the bureaus, no matter what bureau it is, we're going to be out there, and we're going to work with the community and try to find out exactly what's happening. When I was referring to uptick in violence, when you asked me a question about across the country, well, I'm referring to other parts of the country where the violence has gone through the roof, and accountability for the individuals that were responsible for this, for the crimes, for these actions, wasn't there. And again, some folks' cell site simulators were taken away. And if I'm talking candidly about the cell site simulator, yes, it's helped us solve crimes and bring individuals to justice. But what that cell site simulator has done, it's helped save lives, many lives. And so I struggle with that. Each time I get a call as to, can we deploy the machine, I have to make a decision if and when we can, if it meets the criteria to deploy the machine. At least we still have the cell site simulator to use. Other folks do not. That's what I was kind of trying to speak on. But again, going back to the community engagement, we have community service officers in every district. We have officers that are assigned to beats in every district. They're there. They're speaking with the community. Investigative bureaus are going out and speaking to the community. And in these areas where we're seeing this uptick, we're working with our city partners. We're working with all our partners to try to get to the bottom of who's who's driving the violence, and then put some strategies in place to prevent any more violence and to help people heal from the violence that's happening in the community. And I'm happy to say that, we've recently, without not speaking too much in specific of the investigations, we've recently arrested several individuals who were driving the violence, who were significant in driving the violence in the neighborhood. And again, that was done collectively, working with our city partners and with the community.
Thank you for that. And the last question, and can you just state for the record why you think we ended up in this place to begin with, in terms of filing this ordinance?
Again, I would, opinions of folks for lack of transparency, accountability, and fearing that misconceptions of people, whether that is through watching TV and trying to correlate that with actually what the Boston Police Department really has and is capable of doing. So again, I think it's just lack of understanding, and it'll go back to transparency and accountability. Some folks do not understand and have not spoken to the correct people.
So, lastly, I do have a severe problem with the gang database. And I do believe that there is there's racial profiling. I've stated that, and I've always been challenged in regards to the fact that we don't. And I do know that it's not so much opinions. The data speaks for itself. And I think that we have an opportunity here in this moment to figure out how we reconcile with that lack of trust.
I can appreciate that, but I will argue that the gang database has been invaluable to investigations. And again, I'm not sure if you were able to hear what Lieutenant Detective Paul McLaughlin was able to offer relative to the steps that they've taken prior to an ordinance to try to probably correct any issues that may have been there in the past.
I wasn't here for that, so I can't confirm nor deny or challenge that point. But thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Mejia. Thank you, Chief and Lieutenant Detective and Superintendent, and the team here of captains, sergeant detectives, lieutenant detective, sergeants. Just ask that you stay with us a little bit longer. We have the advocate panel. I see that Cade Crockford's here, Fatima Ahmad. So Cade's from the director of the ACLU Technology and Liberty Program. Fatima Ahmad is from the ACLU Executive Director, Muslim Justice League, and also Alex Matthews, ACLU Director of Digital Forward. So just ask that you stick around, or at least a portion of the team stick around. I know that we've got a lot of stuff happening in our city, and your time is extremely valuable, but if some of the members could stay available just in case there's any follow-up, give the courtesy to the advocates. They've been waiting patiently to address the body as another panel. We also have some public testimony and some Zoom testimony as well. So thank you all for your time and attention, and look forward to continue working together. Thank you. Yeah, no, so there'll be a panel taking your seats here, and then if you'd like to take seats in the gallery. Good morning, still morning. Appreciate your patience, Cade, Fatima, and Alex. State your name and affiliation for the record, and you have the floor for opening statements, and then maybe even opine on some of the things that you've been listening to this morning.
Great, thanks.
Yes.
My name is Kate Crawford. I'm the director of the technology program.
Hi, I'm Fatima Ahmed. I'm executive director of Muslim Justice League.
And I'm Alex Matthews. I'm the chair of Digital Fourth.
So if it's all right with you, Chair, I'm happy to start. Great. Thank you very much to the counselors who are still with us. I know that people are very busy. There's a lot going on. I also just want to say thank you to David Fredette and Teresa Anderson from BPD, who have put a lot of work into this, and another man whose name I'm forgetting at the moment. Thank you as well. I know that this has been a very time-consuming process for the Boston Police Department. So I think, to use my time most effectively today, I'm going to start by backing up a little bit and talking about why we at the ACLU, our coalition partners, and many of you who are here today on the council and your colleagues last session decided that this was an important ordinance for the city of Boston to implement. So since about the period after 9/11, we have seen a number of transformations take place in the United States. One of them is the digital transformation, right? The use of cell phones exploded in the early 21st century. So consumer technologies that create a lot of data, allowing the government to essentially piggyback on corporate data collection and surveillance, exposing millions of people to new forms of surveillance that were never before possible. This was also accelerated by the declining cost of computer storage. So believe it or not, in the 1980s, it cost about $75,000 to store 1 gigabyte, and that computer space took up like half of this room. So obviously things have changed quite a bit in the past 40 years, and especially in the past 20 years with respect to what's possible in terms of technology. Now it's actually in some ways cheaper to retain data than it is to delete it, because you have to hire someone to maintain a database and make sure that the information is actually erased, whereas, Amazon provides server storage that is pretty dirt cheap, and I believe the city of Boston uses those kinds of third-party data storage services. The other thing that happened in the post-9/11 period was 9/11, obviously, and the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, the creation of the program that the man who was previously sitting in this chair was discussing, the Urban Area Security Initiative program, which funneled billions of dollars from the federal government down to state and local government for the purchase of things like surveillance camera networks, license plate readers, access to database systems that provide the police with all sorts of information that they never had access to before, and crucially, not simply about people who are suspected of crimes, but about all of us. Every person in this room is in databases like the one that the BPD accesses through their agreement with Thomson Reuters, the CLEAR database. That's not a database of people who have been accused of serious crimes. It's a database of all American adults. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage there, because even though all those transformations were happening, and another one was that, the police were buying things like license plate readers, drones, surveillance camera networks. This council, or the previous council, already dealt with the issue of facial recognition technology, but that's another technology that, we're seeing governments use all over the country and all over the world. While all of this was happening, there was not a parallel effort, mostly in legislatures, either at the state level or at the federal level, to address what all of this means for people's basic civil rights and civil liberties. And so, we in the civil rights and civil liberties community were kind of in this position where these technologies were coming up one at a time, mostly actually when something goes wrong, right? Mostly when, one of the technological systems a reporter discovers is being used disproportionately to target Black and brown people. Or in another case here in Boston, when the Boston Transportation Department, accidentally left an entire license plate reader data set on the public internet for anyone to download, exposing hundreds or thousands of people to a very serious privacy violation. Or when, a young person was deported because he was wrongfully identified as a gang member by the Boston Police Department. That information was shared with ICE, etc. So too often we have addressed these issues not in a systemic way by, democratizing the process around how decisions about surveillance are made, but on a case-by-case kind of whack-a-mole basis when there's a crisis, right? And many of us, including some of the people in this room, agreed that this was not the best way of addressing surveillance policymaking and procurement decisions at the municipal level here in Boston. So we came up with this idea of passing this ordinance. And so the goal of the ordinance, and I'll just say for those of you who are listening who maybe don't remember, and for those of you who are not on the council at the time, that it passed unanimously. Every single person on the council at the time, this was last year, voted in support of this ordinance. So it wasn't actually a controversial issue to bring transparency and accountability and oversight to Boston police surveillance practices. I'll just say a couple of other things about the ordinance itself. So the purpose of the ordinance is to take decision-making, again, out of the behind the closed doors, frankly, procurement process and into the public square, right? Here at the Boston City Council, where members of the public, experts, folks in communities that are over-policed and over-surveilled can learn about what is happening at the Boston Police Department, what kinds of technologies are in place, what policies and procedures are in place to ensure that people's rights are not violated, and then ask the City Council to enact oversight and accountability. And that can happen in two different ways. One is by the council saying, you know what, we've heard from the BPD, we've heard from the community, we've maybe consulted with academic experts who study the issue. We don't actually think Boston needs drones, for example. So we're going to say no. Actually, we're going to vote no to say that, the Boston Police Department should not have drones. So that's one option. Or the council can say, yes, we agree, all of these technologies are appropriate, the BPD should continue to use them. In that case, the council has another role to play, which is to say, are the policies governing these technologies that the BPD has proposed appropriate? Are there any areas where we need to make some changes to the policies and procedures that are governing the use of these technologies, the data that they produce, maybe, who can access the information under what circumstances, those types of things. So having said all of that, this is a lot of work. It's a lot of work not only for the BPD, it's a lot of work for the council, it's a lot of work for members of the public who want to be engaged in the process. And I think if I heard anything from the administration panel this morning that was really clear, it was that we haven't had enough time to go through all of these, hundreds of pages of documents, that the council hasn't had enough time, that the administration still needs some more time to produce additional answers to some of the questions that our groups have posed to them in light of their initial submission. So that's, we agree, by the way, that we would all benefit from having some more time to discuss these issues before the council votes on them. I'll just say a few more things, which is that another thing that struck me about the administration's presentation a few minutes ago is that we continued to hear what we've often heard from law enforcement about surveillance, which is that surveillance is safety. Surveillance advances community safety, and that we need it in order for the police to be able to keep people safe. I think what you're going to hear today from our panel is a different perspective on surveillance. We don't necessarily believe that surveillance is safety. In some cases, actually, surveillance can directly harm people. And I don't just mean in a kind of esoteric sense where people may have their speech rights chilled or they may not feel comfortable associating with certain people because the government's watching them, although those are also very serious harms that derive from surveillance. I'm also talking about actual physical harm. We know, for example, that not all police officers are doing the right thing. I don't have to remind people in this room of the fact that the outgoing president of the Boston Police Patrolmen's Association was a detective for many years at the Boston Police Department and has just been convicted of raping children. So we are also talking about ensuring that the people within BPD who have access to very sensitive information about police investigations, about ordinary people who are not suspected of crimes, are not misusing or abusing their access to that information. That is a very serious responsibility for all of us, for counselors, for the administration, and for the BPD. And it is my belief that this process will help us get to a place where we can ensure that that's not happening, or at least put necessary checks and balances in place that can catch that kind of misuse and abuse. I guess I'll just wrap up and pass it on to Fatima by saying that, kind of in the same vein as what I just said, there is not actually a whole lot of evidence that things like surveillance cameras or information sharing that the Fusion Center, the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, is conducting advances community safety. We've heard that fusion centers like BRIC are really important to prevent terrorism, for example. There's only ever been one real attempt to study whether or not fusion centers have meaningfully advanced the United States government's fight against terrorism. That was a congressional study that was done in 2012 by a Republican, actually, and he found that not a single fusion center had produced one shred of information, and there are 75 of them nationwide, that not a single fusion center had produced a shred of information that was useful in a United States government counterterrorism effort, and that in fact, what they had done was violate civil rights and civil liberties of various groups of people across the country, and that is also true in Boston. In Boston, our office, working with the National Lawyers Guild a few years ago, published a report based on documents that we obtained from the Boston Regional Intelligence Center about BRIC's surveillance of anti-war protesters and, other kind of left-wing peace groups in the city of Boston. This stuff had nothing to do with terrorism, but was being labeled as, domestic extremism. So again, another example of why it's really important that the council be engaged in direct oversight and accountability processes with respect to what goes on in the BRIC. The last thing I'll say is that in addition to giving the council control over surveillance technology acquisitions and policies, the other thing that this ordinance does is require the administration, the police department, and the other agencies that are subject to this more strict portion of the ordinance to report back to the council and the public annually about how these technologies are used. And I think that that's going to be really illuminating for all of us because, again, I think we're often told that surveillance provides a really key set of capabilities for law enforcement that enables them to solve very serious crimes. I'm really looking forward to when the first reporting deadline comes, the public and the council having a chance to actually see some of those statements backed up with data. Because up until now, what we typically hear is anecdotal information about the value of these technologies. And I think it's going to be really, really important and interesting to see what the actual data looks like. How many murder investigations, for example, hinged, the solving of them hinged on surveillance data that comes from license plate readers or stingrays or surveillance cameras. And how many, very serious kidnapping cases or other very serious criminal investigations were solved through the use of these technologies. So anyway, I'm really looking forward to the reporting, and I just again want to thank everyone on the council. Thank you, Chair Flaherty, Vice Chair Lara. Thanks to the folks from the administration who are here, who have poured a lot of effort into this process. Democracy is hard work, and if we lived in an authoritarian society where the security state made all the decisions behind closed doors and we didn't care about things like transparency and accountability, it would be a lot less work for everyone. But I think we're all glad that we do not live in that type of society, and so processes like this are really important. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Kate Crockford. Fatima, welcome, and name and affiliation for the record.
Yeah, I'm Fatima Ahmed. I am Executive Director of Muslim Justice League. Very excited to be here to start off this process for this new ordinance that was unanimously passed, as Kate reminded us. And I'll reiterate, we agree. It sounds like the administration does need more time. There's information actually required from the ordinance that has not been shared yet, as well as, additional questions coming. And I think we can all agree, not only is there more time needed to get that information, but really the most important part here is more time for the public to actually have input on this. As, Kate went over the process, I'll also just share, this first version is the biggest undertaking for you all, right? After this, you just get annual reports updating you on how the technology has been used. But of course, this first time, this 1,000-page package is quite significant to go through. But it is really important for the public to actually have input because, a big reminder is why did we have to implement this ordinance? And actually, current Mayor Wu is one of the people who championed this as a city councilor, because there were multiple times when BPD was clearly not transparent about surveillance technologies. And these things actually came out, through journalist investigations. The first that I at least can remember of recent times was social media surveillance. They were using technology called geophilia and actually surveilling Muslims like myself for using common Arabic terms like ummah, terms that we use every day. Ummah means community. And even a more common thing that I think probably or hopefully all of you have used on social media, which is hashtag Black Lives Matter. And actually, Counselor Tito Jackson at the time was part of that surveillance because he had been using that, that language. So we're not kidding when we say, you know, everyone here probably is in some of these databases. I believe Brick also had a file on former Mayor Marty Walsh for having spoken at Occupy. The second time was drones, and I think actually a current City Hall staffer was the person who noticed drones flying over a neighborhood in Jamaica Plain and asked a bunch of us, what is going on here? What are these drones? Where is this coming from? And through investigations, we found out that the Boston Police Department had bought drones, and City Council was unaware of this. I don't remember exactly what the funding source was that bypassed you all. And while geophilia that I mentioned earlier, it seems like it's no longer in use since it's not on this list, the drones clearly are, and I think are of major concern to many community members. And then even after the surveillance ordinance passed, oddly enough, just I think within the past year, it was found that BPD had bought Stingray devices through civil asset forfeitures, again, totally bypassing City Council even after this ordinance had passed. And all of these items, when they have come out, have had much community concern and scrutiny, but there has been no public process yet, because all of those times, the biggest thing was we didn't even know these things existed, right? We don't know how they were bought. I think that's information that we're still waiting on from this ordinance. What are the costs for these items? You know, how much are we paying for all of this? And where are they in use? What neighborhoods, you know, have the biggest density? Clearly certain neighborhoods that have like a large density of cameras. So there's so much more community input that is needed on many of these items, and I'll share a few. I think one that's actually not in BPD, and the OEM person who was here didn't speak to this, is the CIMS Camera Information Management System. That's a regional camera network that is under OEM. He did speak to the UASI grant, which I don't think was part of the public notice for this hearing, and I do want to say when there is a public notice for that, you know, we want to have a lot more input on that. There will be a national report coming out, I think on December 1st, about UASI grants and how they actually require that funding goes to fusion centers. So that is a way that BRIC stays in place, is by requiring all of this OEM money to have to also give money to fusion centers. And it's very concerning in and of itself. But I will say, you know, they didn't speak to CIMS, which is this big regional network. Of the cities that they listed, Cambridge actually pulled out of CIMS at the beginning of that, you know, infrastructure. And I don't know that there's been much public process or scrutiny since then, or even other, you know, city input on who wants to maintain this camera, you know, surveillance network. We do know that Mayor Janey, when it was up for renewal, did actually pause that for a year because we brought up concerns to her. And I believe Mayor Wu went ahead and approved that last year without, you know, public input. That is one that falls outside of BPD that I want to make sure you all are aware of. I think one that many counselors, you know, already have taken public stances against is the gang database. That is one where, you know, I don't know why the current administration hasn't moved on it yet. Mayor Wu made, I think, over a dozen public, you know, stances to actually get rid of the gang database, and we would have liked to have seen it gone by now. I'll actually just quote her directly saying, "I think I'm one of just a few candidates who's been calling out that even that database where they're going to supposedly search gang affiliation is deeply, deeply flawed, biased, inaccurate, and should be dismantled in and of itself." Many other counselors here and our new Attorney General actually have come to the conclusion that the gang database must be eliminated. We hope that this council can continue to lead, current Attorney General Andrea Campbell, or new Attorney General, led on this as a counselor both against BRIC and the gang database. And this is a moment where the council can lead on this again and really push Mayor Wu to share, why haven't they made that a priority to go ahead and eliminate that gang database, which people have really come to a consensus on. There's a number of other items on there that deserve scrutiny, and I think the other thing I'll highlight is we now have, we passed and defended a law to give licenses to our undocumented family and community members. And we actually really need to be thoughtful then about license plate readers and many other technologies that are going to impact undocumented folks. I think the OEM person who spoke, spoke about how they're supporting migrants, but it's really actually hard to do that when we know that much of this technology feeds back to DHS through BRIC, right? That's why the gang database has been an issue. We've clearly seen youth deported because so much of this information is directly going back to DHS and ICE. And so we really need to think through not just the license plate readers, but the many databases here, like LexisNexis, like Clear, that nationally people know are selling people's information back to ICE or to other federal agencies and have impacted immigrant communities. So I think, that is a lot, and that's just the surface level of what we know from this huge package of information. And I really hope we take seriously, deeply scrutinizing all of these technologies and policies and actually creating a process where community actually get to have input on this.
Thank you, Fatima. Alex, welcome. State your name and affiliation for the record.
Hi, my name is Alex Matthews. I'm the chair of Digital Fourth, which is a Massachusetts-based volunteer civil liberties organization. We specialize in matters to do with privacy and surveillance and the Fourth Amendment. I want to say up front that there is a certain amount of shared goals here. I think all of us want to see a use of surveillance technology in the city that is effective, that is fair, and that advances public safety. The merit of the ordinance is that it takes that set of aims and puts it in the hands of the elected officials, and thereby via the people, to have the right to say no on a given technology deployment, not simply being passive recipients of information that is supplied by the police department or by BRIC, but exercising independent judgment by virtue of being elected officials, and it is only right and proper that that should be the case. My task here today is to show you a little of what happens when we do delve into one of the technologies that is listed in this large pile of documents, and to illustrate from that the value of this process. The technology that I'm going to be talking about is ShotSpotter, which is a gunshot detection technology. It involves ShotSpotter Inc., which is based in California, and a contract between ShotSpotter and Boston PD, whereby audio microphones are placed in various parts of the city. Audio, it's a little like, it's older than Alexa, but think of it like an Alexa. It activates when there is something that ShotSpotter defines as a gunshot-like noise. It is continuously recording, and it does pick up things other than gunfire-like sounds, but it flags in ShotSpotter's system when there is something that ShotSpotter's artificial intelligence systems have previously identified as being something that is like a gunshot. ShotSpotter then sends that information to Boston PD, and Boston PD deploys to that location. Now, this technology sounds like it might be helpful. And for police officers who look at this who are not necessarily trained in artificial intelligence or in how these systems might work, then the level of analysis that has been applied to this technology to date has been basically, it gets us more quickly to a location where there may be gunfire, and therefore, who can possibly say that this would be a bad thing? My training is partly in public policy and program evaluation. I look at technologies and programs like this, and I can give you some helpful information that would set a context that enable all of us to think more deeply about this. For a start, we can compare ShotSpotter deployments in different cities. And we have information that was provided by Cambridge PD to the Cambridge City Council when they were considering ShotSpotter deployment. They were asked, what portion of these alerts through this system are false positives? What proportion of them are false alarms? The information that was provided to Cambridge City Council at that point suggested that 67% of the alerts were false alarms. So that includes cars backfiring, it includes firecrackers, it includes anything that is a loud and sudden and sharp noise. We could ask ShotSpotter what proportion of their alerts are false, but they have not provided to any municipality the results of an independent evaluation of what percentage of their alerts are false. So let's bear in mind the local data that we have. 2/3 of their alerts are false. What does that imply? Well, it increases speed of response by police officers, but response to what? It's not going to be hugely helpful to any of us or to the police department if police officers are herring around car backfires or things that may or may not be the results of gunfire. If they think that they are heading into a situation where individuals may be armed, then that is a high adrenaline, high risk situation. They're not going to have in the forefront of their mind, oh, there's a 2/3 chance that this is nothing. They're going to have in the forefront of their mind, there's a 1/3 chance that this is real. As a result of that high adrenaline environment, we have seen in other cities that it creates the risk of things going badly wrong. In Chicago, for example, there was a 13-year-old boy, Adam Toledo, who was shot to death by police after they responded to a ShotSpotter alert in his neighborhood. These kinds of risks are concomitant on the too casual deployment of surveillance technology. There's also a question here of substitution. If the police are going around after these false alerts, what are they not responding to? What is the waste of police resources that goes into and is driven by the ShotSpotter deployment when they could be going out and doing other more positive involvement and response? So we don't have Boston-specific figures. ShotSpotter is not about to provide them. But as a consequence of this process, it would be useful to have those Boston-specific information so that we can all come to a conclusion as to whether this is a useful way for police to spend the time. The second element that I'm going to talk about is where these microphones are. The Boston Police Department supplied, as part of the large packet in Appendix FF, page 6, a map of the deployments of these microphones, not like where the individual microphones are, but the geographic area. If you overlay it on a demographic map of Boston, I'm afraid the pattern is pretty clear. We are talking about Roxbury, we're talking about Mattapan, we are talking about the western portions of your district, Councillor Fenn, but mostly we're talking about Councillor Worrell and Councillor Fernandez-Anderson's districts. The result of having a map of microphones that covers those specific areas is an ongoing process where black residents of Boston are systematically more likely to be audio monitored than non-black residents. And nobody is saying necessarily that this is a conscious process by Boston PD, but this is just a fact based on where these microphones are deployed. So let's think a little bit about what that would do to the data. Boston has had this contract with ShotSpotter since 2008. Microphones listening, microphones alerting. 14 years worth of data that focuses on that specific geographic area and has the information go into the shots fired database. The result is that ShotSpotter conveniently provides for Boston PD a justification for their continued deployment to and focus on that geographic area. Fast, aggressive deployment to possible gunshots in the areas where black residents of the city live, and for other areas, presumably slower responses, slower focus, and less data going into the system, which then compounds over time such that the data that Boston PD is seeing is, well, this is where the problem is. This is even more where the problem is. This is even more where the problem is. And it becomes circular. They find gunfire there because that's where the microphone's there. Why are the microphones there? Well, that's what ShotSpotter put them in for. But it is productive of a systematic over-surveillance of certain neighborhoods and perhaps under-surveillance of others. I am sorry to say that that is not the limit of what can go wrong with these systems. There have been reports from other cities and states that ShotSpotter and police departments sometimes have, let's say, collaborative relationships, such that police have gone back to ShotSpotter and said, look, your audio alerts do not match the narrative of the individual that we are trying to charge. Can you go back into the system and reconfigure your alerts retroactively so that it fits with the narrative? And the response of ShotSpotter in those reported situations, and I have links in our written testimony, is sure thing. There is a significant potential for injustice here. And that fact that the ShotSpotter evidence did not really match up with it, did not come out in the case that is reported on until the defendant was a couple of years into the process of being charged and being in prison awaiting trial and then going to trial. I'm not saying that this is routine as part of ShotSpotter, but the fact that it is possible in ShotSpotter's systems speaks to the reliability or lack of it in the ShotSpotter system. We should all share an objective where we're concerned about outcomes. We are all concerned about public safety. So again, looking specifically at ShotSpotter, how many arrests have arisen out of this system? Well, we don't know, and you won't find that in the reporting that we've had to date. What were the arrests for? Well, we don't know that either. Were there any convictions that arose out of it at all? Well, we don't know that. Just as with you as city councillors, the budgets that you pass express the priorities that you have, we feel that after 14 years of ShotSpotter deployment, if the police department cared about the outcomes that are important to us as a community, they would have been looking at that. Instead, it is operated on a superficial level. This looks like a handy tool to get to a place quicker. So, without a proper program evaluation having been done, we don't, and you don't have the information right now to assess whether it's a proper use of public funds. In other towns and cities, there have been such evaluations. And there have been cities that have been stepping back from their use of ShotSpotter and ending those contracts. In Charlotte, North Carolina, in Dayton, Ohio, in Fall River. We have seen cities decide not to pursue this because it's simply not a good use of funds. That concludes my comments on ShotSpotter, but I just want to remark briefly on an important thing that was said by Councillor Louis-Jean. The police panel pointed to the existence of a redress policy at the BRIC for people whose privacy rights have been violated. And they said, we have this policy, it's written down, people can make use of it if people have felt that their privacy has been violated. I would say that outside the police department, to be honest, there are not many people who have looked as closely as I have on the data, as to the complaints that have been made under the BRIC privacy policy. And I can say that it is extraordinarily difficult to make a complaint. The policy is designed in such a way that redress will never, in fact, be provided. And there are no cases in the privacy log of redress having been provided since BRIC was founded. Part of the reason for this is that the policy says that it excludes categorically any information that is held in criminal intelligence databases, and that includes the gang database, that includes many databases that BRIC holds. And so, if you can't get redress for situations where BRIC holds data on you, what can you get redress for? So, there is only one function of the BRIC privacy policy and the BRIC redress policy, and that is meetings like this, where BRIC can be asked by city councillors, what do you do for redress? And they can say, we have a redress policy. There's no other purpose to it, and practically there is nothing else that it has been used for. So I just wanted to clear that up.
Thank you, Alex. Chair recognizes my colleagues on arrival, Council President Flynn, and we've also been joined by City Council Tanya Fernandez-Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the panelists for being here as well. I have had the opportunity to work with residents and community groups and certainly the police on ShotSpotter, and I do know the incredible tool it provides the Boston Police and the residents. And not sure if the data from Cambridge would reflect what we have here in Boston. I would assume it's different, but I do know it's an important tool that we have in this city to try to keep our residents as safe as we possibly can. The other part of it I think about is when this audio does flow to the Boston Police respond appropriately to that area. But I think about the lives saved because of the Boston Police responding and probably preventing further shootings in that particular area. So in 5 years that I've been a city council, almost 6 years I've been a city councilor representing the South End, where we do have it in other areas, not one resident has said to me, Councilor Flynn, we need to get rid of this. I'm in the community every day, every night. I'm in there 6-7 nights a week, listening to residents. People, my constituents say to me, Councilor Flynn, we need more resources. What are you doing about it? Are you going to advocate for more police, Councilor Flynn? How are you going to get more police in certain particular parks? And they're right to ask me those questions because that's the job I was elected to do. But my goal as a district city councilor representing South Boston, the South End, and Chinatown, representing areas close to Mass and Cass as well, Andrew Square. My goal is to provide as much resources to prevent crime, community policing, so that we can have safe neighborhoods. We were talking about the increase in violence or the uptick in violence, however we phrase it. But what's important is we work together, listen to the residents in the impacted communities. Because residents in the impacted communities will often say to me, what are we going to do to bring more police to our city? We don't have enough police officers in Boston, and that's what I continue to advocate for, that we do desperately need more police, and we need more resources. One other concern I had is when this information eventually is brought back to the Boston City Council to review, whether it's annually or semi-annually, I'm wondering, or I'm thinking out loud, how that material is brought back to us. Are we getting specific locations? Are we getting information that could impact an ongoing investigation, or what are some of the parameters that would take place getting us this information? I just want to make sure that when information is brought to the city council, that information is protected and it doesn't get into the public domain. That's an important aspect for me. I'm probably the only person here on the city council that has had top secret security in my life. But I think knowing when we get secret information or classified information maybe, how is that being physically delivered to the city council? Are we under an obligation to make sure it stays here at the Boston City Council level? We have public meetings about it, but I want to make sure I get input from the Boston police as well, and you, and residents, about how we safeguard that material. Any comments on that type of question?
Yeah, through the chair. Thanks for the question. Looks like my mic's, okay, there we go. Through the chair, thank you for the question. The Boston Police Department is not like the CIA or the U.S. military in the sense that, in my view at least, it should not be handling classified information that, is not accessible to either members of the public or to city councilors. Obviously, there are state laws that prevent the Boston Police, or allow the Boston Police Department to withhold from public disclosure information that would jeopardize an existing investigation. To the question about how granular the information should be that the Boston Police Department presents to the council about, for example, the location of surveillance cameras, this is actually an issue that we have some significant concerns about in the initial submissions that the BPD provided to the council and to the public. There was not any information about the location of the over 1,000 surveillance cameras that BPD has access to across the city. And so we asked in a subsequent communication to the police department and the administration for more detail about where those cameras are. I'm sure you can understand there are a number of reasons why residents and civil rights advocates would want to know if there is, for example, a higher number of cameras in black and brown communities as opposed to whiter areas of the city like West Roxbury. And in fact, that's exactly what is happening. Last night at about 4 o'clock, Attorney Fredette sent a letter to respond to the letter that our three organizations had sent to the city asking for follow-up information about some things. And in that letter, did provide a little bit more details about where some of those cameras are, but broken down by police district, which, as you know, is a very large area geographically. Each of those police districts, some of them encompass square miles of territory. So as someone who does live in one of the most heavily surveilled areas of the city, I live in the Brunswick King neighborhood, kind of in between Upham's Corner and Dudley Square, Nubian Square. And, there are surveillance cameras all over the place in my neighborhood, and you can see them with your eyes. So it's not exactly like a big, national security secret that they're there. We have heard through folks in the administration that some people in the police department are concerned about providing more granular information about the location of the cameras in particular. For example, I think one of the concerns that I heard that was expressed is that people might try to plot a route out of the city that you could drive without being seen by a surveillance camera. Not really sure what types of criminals the BPD is dealing with. I don't know that folks are that sophisticated necessarily. But as I said before, you can certainly see them with your own eyes. They're not hidden from public view. And so we remain a little bit confused about why the locations of the cameras are not disclosed in more granular detail to the public, to the council. Doing so, I think, would give all of us a better, and frankly, one thing that I haven't mentioned yet, but I think is actually crucial to these discussions is the ability of criminal defendants and defense lawyers to have access to information that the BPD have. So, I've frequently gotten emails from defense counsel saying, hey, do you know if there's a surveillance camera at such and such corner, or if there are cameras in this neighborhood, because, I've got a case where somebody's being charged with XYZ, and I'd really like to see if, I could get access to some of that footage. That's yet another reason why I think it would be helpful to have some more granular information available to the public about where these cameras are, so that folks can, provide an adequate defense for themselves, for their clients, by asking the police department for that information. We know the police told us that they delete that data or write over it every 30 days. So there's not a whole lot of time that people have to make a request to the BPD to preserve information from a surveillance camera. So in any event, I think we may have some different instincts about how much information should be public. We would lean in favor of, more transparency. I think that if there are situations in which the police need to withhold information, I think that, there ought to be a lot of information provided about why that's necessary, and not so much speculative information, but more kind of concrete details about why, providing details about XYZ technology could threaten public safety or the, sanctity of criminal investigations. Because again, you can see the cameras with your eyes on the street. They're not hidden.
Thank you, Kate. And let me just follow up. To say thank you to you for your work, and to the Boston police that are here. But from my experience as a district city councilor, ShotSpotter plays a critical role in our city, in our neighborhoods. Residents are asking for more of it, to be honest with you. They're asking me for more of this sophisticated technology in my neighborhood, in my communities, and they know it's helpful. It's also helpful to the police. It's helpful to the public as well. So that's one issue I just wanted to stress. The other issue, Mr. Chair, is that I also wanted to stress. I did speak about it, but when information is brought to this council, we have to be certain that we safeguard that material, especially if it's somewhat classified. We just can't release documents into the public domain, and it could have an further impact on public safety. Certainly, we all want to be transparent, but we want to make sure information that we are putting out to the public does not jeopardize any cases and/or public safety and the health of our residents. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I can respond,
Mr.
sorry.
President, through the chair.
Just want to be clear that we're not talking about classified information, and it feels really hard to have the council questioning an ordinance that was unanimously passed after BPD had multiple working sessions with the ACLU to come up with all of these requirements. So that location requirement, BPD shouldn't be surprised by it. I think we're just surprised why it hasn't been fulfilled, but there was a lot of work from advocates along with the police that went into creating, the requirements of this ordinance. So it should have come up at that point if it was a concern. And also want to reiterate, I'm a resident of Dorchester, impacted by violence. There's plenty of violence in my neighborhood. I do not want ShotSpotter. My office is in your district in Chinatown. I don't want ShotSpotter, and there has been no public process around ShotSpotter. We just had a workshop with community members on that surveillance list. So we actually did go over that with maybe 40 to 50 community members, and most of them were surprised that there were so many technologies that they don't know about, including ShotSpotter, and most of them said they also want it gone. So I hope that we have a public process where people can actually share that with you all.
My constituents in Chinatown want ShotSpotter. That's an invaluable tool in Chinatown. It's a critical tool. Sir, I know the two neighborhoods you're from. What neighborhood are you from, sir?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Flynn. Oh, thank you. Through the chair.
Bless.
I am a resident of Belmont, Mass, not a resident of Boston.
Thank you, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because when there's quality of life issues or public safety issues in my district, you know, as a district city councilor, when something goes wrong, there's two people to blame. It's the mayor and the district city councilor. I think all district city councilors would acknowledge that. That's why I advocate for resources for my constituents, because as a district city councilor, we don't have the luxury, and same with the at-large councils, we don't have the luxury to pass the buck. It's the mayor and the district city councilors are held responsible for what happens in their community. And district city councilors, myself included, take that personally. So I need all the resources and tools in my district to make sure we have a safe and vibrant, healthy neighborhoods. And ShotSpotter is part of it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Chair recognizes City Councilor Kendra Lara. Any questions of this panel?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the panelists for being here today and sharing all of that information. Regarding the ShotSpotter data, because I think that we're there right now, and I think that one of the things that is frustrating for me when having these conversations is that we continue to make decisions, particularly when it relates to the Boston Police Department, based on anecdotal evidence or stories that people come and share with us. And conveniently, some of those stories come from the Boston Police Department, and sometimes they come from my fellow council members. Boston is one of the top largest 25 cities in the country. I am not going to make decisions about where money is spent based on anecdotal evidence that people are giving me when I do not actually have the facts in front of me. We're not going to make decisions about where we spend the money and where we put money. Now, at this point, it really does sound like we're reading from a script in terms of like the talking points about surveillance and police in the city of Boston. It's incredibly frustrating for me because we're not actually having a real conversation. I think that the chief who was on the administrative panel made a comment that to me was very salient, where he says, how do we have balanced, in good faith conversations about the issues that we're having here? That is what I would like to do. If we are just reiterating our same talking points without any actual information or proof of any of those things, then we're not actually having a conversation in good faith. And so I just wanted to apologize for that continued behavior, because I know that you all have been doing incredible work, not just around this, but around oversight and spending around the police department. And I'm sure that it's also incredibly frustrating for you to not get the answers to your questions. Now, people in the neighborhoods, in our neighborhoods, in my district specifically, cannot know if a ShotSpotter is useful or not, cannot advocate for something that they believe is a useful tool because no one has that information. We don't actually have that information. The people in our neighborhoods do not have that information. ShotSpotters has not given us that information. The Boston Police Department has not given us that information. And anybody who was paying attention to anything in the city of Boston, and myself, who I'm very intimately familiar with the brick in my time, my 4 years as a street worker in the city, both in Councilor Flynn's district, in the South End and Lower Roxbury, and in Mattapan, I don't know that a ShotSpotter would be. How many shootings or how many guns are going off in Chinatown? I would like that number through the chair, if that is a conversation that we're having, and to talk about what the usefulness of those things are. And because, again, it is incredibly frustrating that we continue to talk conjecture when we're talking about you're coming here and you're sitting in front of us and you're laying down facts and you're giving us examples of how they function and numbers and things that do work and don't work, and we're sitting here like, well, I heard from someone one time. So,
Thank you.
do you have examples of how other cities have implemented these kinds of surveillance oversight policies and the impact that they've had?
Decides,
Yeah.
okay, there we go.
There we go.
So yes, through the chair, Councilor Lara, thank you for that. A number of cities nationwide have implemented similar ordinances, including a number in Massachusetts, our neighbors Somerville and Cambridge among them. Somerville and Cambridge have a couple years of experience prior to the adoption in Boston of dealing with these ordinances. There are also a number of communities across the country that have passed similar laws at the local level. And I'd be happy to get you more materials about how specifically those processes have unfolded in other communities. You know, we, on the advocate side at least, for us, Boston was really the most important community in terms of you know, our goals of bringing more accountability and transparency to surveillance practices in the Metro Boston area for a couple reasons. One, because of the Urban Areas Security Initiative grant process, all of that runs through Boston, so really difficult to get at some of that stuff in Cambridge and Somerville. And because Boston, frankly, is doing a lot more surveillance than any other community, at least in eastern Massachusetts. So I think, you know, we don't have a whole lot of examples in Massachusetts of cities of similar size. San Francisco is a community in the West Coast that's similarly sized that has an ordinance like this on the books. And if, you know, there are other specific questions that you have about how the implementation has unfolded in places like San Francisco or Seattle, I'd be happy to try to get that information for you if I don't have it at top of mind.
Thank you, that's incredibly helpful. Yes.
Just as an example of implementation of such ordinances, there was a reference by a police representative to a situation where the use of a cell site simulator was disapproved as part of an ordinance process. I can speak to that if it would help the committee. I believe that the instance that he is referring to is in the city of Vallejo, California, which is a remote outer suburb of San Francisco. And what happened with Vallejo PD is that they decided they were going to, after an ordinance passed, deploy a cell site simulator without going through the process of the ordinance and public hearings and letting the city council know and all of the procedural elements in this. As a consequence of their not having gone through that and made that decision, they were sued by an advocacy group. And I presume that as a consequence of that lawsuit, the reporting is a little unclear, that Vallejo PD suspended their use of the cell site simulator while litigation was ongoing. I think that it is a useful example for the police representative to have brought up, because the solution to such a situation is clear. If you have an ordinance, if you're one of the many towns and cities now that have these ordinances, you respect the process. You go through the process, and the city council approves or denies particular technologies, and that is fine. It is when people try to circumvent the process that there have been problems.
Through the chair privilege, so referenced, Superintendent, do you want to respond to that comment?
Actually, I'd like to make a response to the ShotSpotter statements that were made. You know, gun violence is a public epidemic, right? and it devastates most communities across the United States, and Boston's not immune to that. And one of the benefits of having ShotSpotter is that the amount of unreported shots fired in the community as high as average of 80% throughout this country. Boston's fare is a little better than that. We're approximately 72% of gunshots go unreported. Over the past 5 years, for example, in 2018, 91% of those gunshots went unreported. That was the highest year. In 2019, it was 63%, 2020, 78%, 2021, 74%, and year-to-date so far is 57%, which comes out to an average of 72%. As far as there's been no independent study with regards to ShotSpotter, there was an independent audit that was completed by Edgeworth Analytics in 2021. An audit found that ShotSpotter correctly detected, classified, and published gunfire incidents by 97.59%. In reviewing our analytic shots fired database, which is confirmed shot fired incidents in Boston, that's where ballistics was recovered, that occurred within the ShotSpotter coverage zone, revealed the statistics that I gave you, which was on average 72% went unreported. And we know when gun violence goes unreported, the individuals responsible for the violence are emboldened. It will put the community members at greater risk. Victims will not get the medical treatment required fast enough, which could turn a survivor into a homicide victim. Residents feel unsafe outside and inside their homes. Parents are fearful of letting their children play outside. Community jobs are lost. Potential for businesses to be established in the community are lost, or established businesses move out, and the cycle of violence will continue. ShotSpotter identifies 90% of more gunfire incidents and relays that information to Boston Police Department within seconds, usually within a 60-second time frame. This enables faster response time, better collection of evidence, medical treatment to victims. It helps us identify hotspots and locate individuals in possession of firearms. Those are benefits to the community members that are most impacted by gun violence. And as far as where the ShotSpotter coverage is, ShotSpotter, we identify the areas with the most gunfire within the city. If we had the budget, we have ShotSpotter everywhere in the city. That would include Charlestown, West Roxbury, South Boston, things of that nature. But because of the budget constraints, we're unable to do that. And in fact, I'll push back on the fact that Chinatown does not want ShotSpotter. They're in the process of trying to gather enough grant money to get ShotSpotter put in the area of Chinatown. So I'll push back on that portion of it. ShotSpotter is not unique to Boston. It's utilized in 130 cities across this country, such as Springfield, Mass., New Bedford, Mass., Hartford, Connecticut, Chicago, Illinois, New York, San Diego, Miami, Florida, Columbus, Ohio, just to name a few that see the value and the benefits of using ShotSpotter. A major benefit, as I stated earlier, is that it detects gunfire in less than 60 seconds and enables a rapid, precise response to render aid to victims. It increases opportunity to capture the individuals involved and collect evidence that will be invaluable to shooting or homicide investigations. With regards to privacy issues, we acknowledge that privacy concerns have been an ongoing battle between law enforcement and communities we serve. ShotSpotter has strict controls to ensure sensors only trigger on loud or explosive or impulsive sounds that are likely gunfire. No community member's information is obtained or used during any part of the detection or alerting process. ShotSpotter works with acoustic sensors strategically positioned in Boston to triangulate the sound of what may be gunshots. Those measurements then go to a company computer for analytical analysis to determine if a gunshot, fireworks, or something else, and at no time is a community being surveilled for their private information. And I'll refer to the statistics provided previously. We look at an average confirmed shots fired over a 5-year period of 182 shots fired, with 130 of those confirmed shots fired with no 911 calls. It equates to 7.2 out of 10 potential gunshot victims that would not have received the aid needed to treat them or perform life-saving CPR or collect evidence that would have been lost. That's invaluable to a shooting or a homicide investigation. It doesn't mean that the department is going to have a 100% success rate with tracking down every individual firing a firearm, but it does provide more significant chance of aiding victims, getting firearms off the street, collecting evidence, and solving the shootings or homicides that occur. Those are clearly benefits to the community. And with regards to the statement that was made that ShotSpotter was changing their data, just this year, August of 2022, Vice Media had to correct those statements made from a defamation lawsuit. They retracted that statement, saying that their information was put into the media incorrectly.
Thank you, Superintendent. Chair recognizes Councilor Kendra Lara.
Thank you, Superintendent. And my assumption is that the Boston Police Department has no issue sharing that report with the Boston City Council?
Yes, I can.
The independent report?
Oh, yeah, from
done around
Edgeworth
ShotSpotter.
Analytics?
Yes.
Yeah, I can get that.
Thank you. Now, I am assuming that because there were statement made by the superintendent that the panel wants the response, and so I'll use my time to question to let you do that.
Thank you very much, Councilor. Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that we're having a sort of mini debate about the ShotSpotter right now is a really good indication that we need to continue this process, and that, you know, one hearing is on all of these materials is wholly insufficient in terms of addressing, you know, the myriad of issues that are raised by all of these different technologies. So I don't actually think that it's productive for us to have a back and forth debate about the merits of ShotSpotter in this particular hearing. I do think ShotSpotter is a technology that we really ought to have a more fully fleshed out conversation about, and that it may require its own hearing, maybe even multiple hearings, so that we can get community questions answered. You know, folks who have varying opinions on the technology can speak to it. The only thing that I would like to correct about what I just heard is that that was not an independent study. The Edgeworth Analytics study was, in fact, commissioned by ShotSpotter. So just want to be clear about that. Thank you.
And that information was left out of our, thank you.
Alex, just start talking, Alex. It picks up. Just a 2-second delay. Sorry about that. No worries.
I agree with the comments of Cade, and I appreciate them. I, in fact, have a quotation from a lawsuit that involved use of that study, where a ShotSpotter forensic analyst was put under oath in court and testified that the 97% accuracy figure was put together by our sales and marketing department, not by engineers. The process of identifying gunshot-like sounds is a hard challenge in artificial intelligence. ShotSpotter does live fire testing, but it does it under controlled conditions. It blocks off streets. It tries to make sure that there is a quiet environment, all things that in cities are not necessarily always the case. And then it has people who test and rate the sounds that they hear and report what they think gunfire sounds like. And so, again, from the same litigation, their engineers report that in the vast majority of cases, ground truth relating to ShotSpotter is not available. It's to be expected that some training data is misidentified. This is the kind of thing that is going to come up with technologies all the time. I will observe that the gentleman who just testified from the police department also contradicted the written submission of the police department, where they were very insistent that it was ShotSpotter that had defined the locations of the microphones, whereas he said that we, meaning the department, had identified the locations. And I just want to observe that inconsistency for the benefit of the council. I think that we know that engineers in San Francisco are not going to know the details on the ground of our neighborhoods, and that they got that information from somewhere. I'm assuming, despite the map, that they didn't just look at the racial demographics and put it in the black neighborhoods, but they got the information from somewhere.
Thank you. Now, I want to yield my time to Councilor Fernandez-Anderson, who I know has been waiting, and I know that we have people who are waiting for public testimony, but I think that, one, I would like to retract my request of that report. I don't want anything that was commissioned by ShotSpotters. That's not an independent study, and gives me no useful information, especially if it's put it together by their marketing department. The one thing that has been made clear to me is that, similar to ShotSpotters and all other use of other technology, I mean, the brick alone could have its own hearing. And now I want to give credit to the Boston Police Department, because since I have worked with the brick and my engagement with the brick, they have done, and a lot has changed. And in the Boston Police Department made that clear during the budget process in terms of the changes that they had made to the brick and how they put brick in. So I just want to commend that work, and we're not finished, right? There's a lot of work to be done. I want to again thank you for the work that you're doing, and just really call on my council colleagues to make decisions that are based on factual information that we have, especially when it comes to how we're spending our money on the Boston Police Department, given that we are fiduciarily responsible for our budget here. And I'm sure that we will see you again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Flynn, on this issue, there's a follow-up question to this?
Yeah, just a follow-up comment, and I'll be very brief. The reason we were talking about ShotSpotter is, Alex, you brought it up in your statement, and I felt it was appropriate for me to respond to it because I know the impact it has in my district, and my residents rely on the tools in the Boston Police for public safety. And that's the reason I responded to your opening statement about Spot Shotter, and we had the discussion about it, but I thought it was appropriate for me to respond because I do know that we need the necessary tools and resources on public safety. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chair recognizes City Councilor Tanya Fernandez-Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilor Lara, I guess I don't want to waste much time because I feel like we have the proper research and questions have been answered, and I've missed a lot of this hearing. So if we are at a state where we have evaluations that prove that these surveillance are ineffective or disproportionately, of course, racist or just majority in Black and brown communities that further discriminate. And then we also, I looked at some research specifically with Cambridge and how these ShotSpotters are actually ineffective and fail about 70% of the time. And so I guess the question is then, what exactly, like where do we make logic out of this? Like what exactly are we talking about? If we have the research and what we have from BPD, clearly they've reported at this point some clarification, Mr. Chair and Councilor Lara, if you will, as to where we are in the conversation if we already have the research.
Chair.
I want to answer that question. And so the part of this process and part of what the ordinance calls for is that these 7 city departments that fall underneath the ordinance submit their policies, surveillance policies, to the Boston City Council, that the Boston City Council reviews the surveillance policies and then approves those policies, and then it'll put us on a schedule of receiving updates yearly from these departments. And so it is a 800+ page document that the City Council is meant to review and then approve and scrutinize kind of the surveillance policies. And so this is our first hearing to ultimately scrutinize the 800-page document that we received so that the Boston City Council can approve and so on. And so this is a process that's only gonna happen once. And where we are in the process now is that although we received an incredible amount of information, and I just want to reiterate that the Boston Police Department with a very short timeline did an incredible amount of work, and the lawyers that I know were thanked earlier, it's incomplete. We don't have all the information that is required by the ordinance. And so we were asking questions to the administration, the Boston Police Department, and now to the panelists that would help us further make decisions about the surveillance use technologies that were given to us. So the chair will make a decision about what happens next with this information.
Thank you,
And
Councilor.
Councilor Fernandez Anderson, it's the Boston Police Department, it's the Boston Parks Department, Park Rangers, Boston Public Schools, Boston Public Health Commission, Boston Housing Authority, Boston Municipal Protection Services, and the Office of Emergency Management. Those will all fall under the surveillance use policy.
Thank you. I think my question's predominantly tailored to BPD, and then realizing that some information was submitted. So I yield my time. Just looking forward to, I guess, some of those documents, and when do we expect that BPD will submit what's missing?
Good question. We'll probably, after the hearing, we'll convene with representatives from the department and the attorneys that have done a tremendous amount of work on this, along with the administration. So I'll try to get you an answer to that through the chair.
Thank you. I guess my final comment is just that we have sufficient research to show us evidence-based policies or results to these dilemmas, and I feel like it's always contentious when it comes to issues of BPD, or if we're talking about removing surveillance or adding surveillance, just the contradiction in terms of like how it's effective or not effective. I know that a lot of the research shows that you're responding to just noise, not necessarily actually resolving crime. And so, but then, if it's helpful 30% of the time of that 30% or the responses, then what's actually happening? So it's just not very clear, and it feels that outside of these hearings, outside of working sessions in the council, it almost, I guess, warrants some level of conversation, a platform where BPD can come together with community advocates and attorneys and people doing the work on the ground to be able to build a relationship every single time when there's an issue presented. And we show the science, and then you show the harm, and then you show your report. For the most part, it does feel like we don't get enough information back from you. So I would say that where's the platform where we come together and actually talk about, true reform, but most importantly, building relationships with the people that have the science. Because it can't be this hard. It just can't be this contentious. And no one is against BPD. In fact, I'm quite sure the advocates, even the ones that spend their voluntary time in all their research and all of their passion and protests, even they are interested in communicating with you and building a relationship with you. And in the last hearings, every time BPD is around, folks, there's so much contention, and at some point, as a city, we have to come together and figure out how does reform work then, if we can't have a conversation with all this backlash and issues. So I guess we keep moving and we keep doing, we'll keep doing the work, and we'll research whatever we've got. And hopefully you heard me today about just, I guess, some of the fact that some of us here are representing, and I talked about this, right? You guys saw me yelling on YouTube, or wherever it was. And I talked about some of this, whereas counselors feel depraved, like they have to hold on to a seat. And so either they're coddling the best interest of the police department, big departments, or unions, or developers, because somehow Boston feel, or when you're a politician, I guess it feels like there are no other opportunities or mobility for us. And so some of us, I think, are going to read or prescribed a certain thing to say or to coddle, and it makes it hard for us to work together. And so when the police, whenever there's a reform, if I get you one-on-one, you'll say, yeah, we need reform. But then we get you in the council, it becomes this thing about us against them, and it's just not true. That's not the case. You know there's harm, and I speak to the black and brown police officers that understand that there is racism in the system and that there needs to be so much change, and yet that code that you have to go by to hold on to your livelihood prevents you from admitting the truth when we come to conversations like this. We have science, we have research, we understand the harm, let's just go with the truth and figure it out so that people are not dying or we're further perpetuating so much harm in Black and brown communities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor, and thank you to this panel, Cade, Crawford, Fatima, Ahmad, and Alex Matthews. Appreciate your time and attention. Look forward to working together again.
Thank
I know
you.
you've been very patient. This is the public testimony portion. Clifton, and I know we have LD Maggins as well, if you want to queue up, but appreciate your patience. Clifton.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
You have the floor to address the.
Hello, everybody. My name's Clifton Braithwaite. I'm the proud son of Aldwin and Gloria Gaskill Braithwaite. And I see here we're reinventing the wheel. There's a lot of new people in office, and there's a lot of new people in our community. But I had the fortunate act to be able to walk step for step with Rob Casalvo, who was the first one to bring this to light with the spot shotter. One thing I'm not hearing, it takes away the place of an elderly person or someone in the community making the actual call. Flynn, you're 100% right. We in the community want the spot shotter. One reason why. When the shot goes off, it can triangulate the area if someone's running from the situation or driving away from the situation. It takes the burden away from the families in the community. Now, is it perfect? No, but all I've been hearing is the wrong and the bad parts of what people feel about spot shotter. There's a lot of new people in my community that don't understand. Your vision of Boston is not the vision of Bostonians who've been here from the beginning. Don't do that. Don't do that. That weren't here from the beginning. Now, we adopt anybody who comes to Boston, Massachusetts, but you got to understand the depth of where we came from. So all we're asking is, why rebuild something? Go to the people who've been embedded in this game. There's nothing wrong with going back to Rob Casalvo, asking him his point of view. There's nothing wrong with going in the community and finding out. I don't know how these three people up here, and I'm not disrespecting anybody, but I don't know how they're speaking for a community when I never seen them. I'm out here every day, even sometimes before the Boston police gets a call and crime and gang violence in my neighborhood. It's me, my family, my crew that is out there. I don't have to prove anything to anybody. My work in my community speaks for itself. But when are we going to stop fighting? Just like the counselor there said. We're fighting each other all the time, and all we have to do, our children, our community are looking for leadership to become one, and we keep fighting over the same thing over and over. Me, Clifton Braithwaite, one of the community leaders, not self-made community leader. I'm a community leader because I've been doing it since the age of 8. All right? I'm 50-something now, and I won't give up the work that I'm doing. I've done it for pay, no respect, with respect. But the bottom line is, if you are the leaders of our community all the way across the board, we support you. But you got to believe in our vision and stop letting people from outside interest groups come in our community and tell us who Boston is. You don't know who Boston is. I was there when it was forced busing. I was there when at one time me and the police were fighting each other because I was young and there was racism. Boston has come a long way, people. A long way. And the reason why it has gotten there, because we have accountability. Most of the police officers actually live in our neighborhood. I was different because I went to school with a lot of them. You know what I mean? So now, community-wise, we're building. We can show the rest of the world what it is, but we got to stop fighting each other. That's all I have to say. God bless the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the Boston residents that make things happen. My name's Clifton Braithwaite, and let's stand together, because as long as we're divided, we're going to keep losing. Thank you.
Thank you, Clifton. Anyone else wishing to offer public testimony may do so now by just approaching that microphone and just state your name and any affiliation for the record.
My name is Ladaro James Higgins. I'm often referred to as LD.
LD.
Thank you, Chairman Flaherty, and I appreciate President Flynn. I was born at the Hospital for Women Lying In 1973. I will be 50 years old on June 5th of next year. There was a time when we were in high school when gunshots put us to sleep at night. And in class the next morning, we could tell you which gun, what type of gun it was. Oh, that was a 9, and all that. That's what it was like when we were growing up. The level of indifference with some of the things that I've seen, not with the brass, but with the panel afterwards, is shocking. Because I haven't heard from the demographic that suffers from the gunshots. But yet there are people that want to get rid of the spot shotter or whatever it's called. I remember when it was implemented. That was so important to people like me who would never join a gang in a million years. Just the regular kids. That was so important to find out who's shooting people or to help the police have as much tools or as many tools as possible. And I want to say unequivocally right now that I want the Boston Police to have as many tools possible at their disposal, as long as what they're doing is going to be above board and have accountability. And I want that accountability as a citizen to stop here with the council and or with the mayor's office, with the city of Boston. Now, what you don't know, and I want to extend my gratitude to Councilor Flynn, is in 2017, I moved to Minneapolis to start a new life, if you will. And I became a roommate with George Floyd, who was killed by Officer Derek Chauvin. I've had an altercation with Derek Chauvin before. I'm saying that to say this, that is the place where the defund the police thing really became a thing. But before I had gotten to Minneapolis, I actually had applied for the 911 job here and did the interview over at the police headquarters. And that's when I learned when you dial 911, that individual has to either direct it to hazmat, fire, ambulance, or whatever. I realized as a layperson that 911 doesn't just mean the police, and that you ought not to be afraid to support the police or dial 911. But Councilor Flynn, I texted you and you hit me back in Minneapolis, and I was going through a hard time. We talked about your dad. And I know it was the right thing to do to speak to you from what you have said today. When you talked about privacy, what happens to these things after they're collected? That is vitally important because the Somali families in Minnesota, and I ended up in the school system, the Minneapolis public school system. My Somali families had kids waking up in the middle of the night with police drones outside their bedroom windows. We can't let that happen. We can't let that happen here. You're talking about intrusive? How would you as a parent feel if your child is screaming and you go up to the bedroom and there's a police drone camera outside the window? This is where we're headed. I want the Boston Police to have as many tools at their disposal as possible. But I want what they do to have a buck where it stops, right here. I want some accountability. And I'm willing to speak. And I made a post and I asked the president to apologize to that young marshal I had a situation with at the vice president's event. Because I get to see the police in their utter glory. Yes, a cop put his knee on my roommate's neck and killed him intentionally. But I also can see them in their utter glory. Let's find that. Thank you.
Thank you, LD. Anyone else wishing to offer public testimony may do so now. Please state your name and any affiliation for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Semirno Falcomorano. I work with CADE. I'm policy counsel at the ACLU of Massachusetts. And I want to briefly address two issues about the process of the ordinance. I have worked with the cities of Somerville and Cambridge in the implementation in those cities. The first one is we have to identify the differences between the technology impact reports that are mentioned in the ordinance and the policies. These reports summarize the main tenets of the technologies themselves and should be self-explanatory. The idea of these reports is that we can give these reports to members of the communities and then they can assess what the technology does and what it is used for. Whereas the policies is they are longer and they explain how they are used and the practices that surround the policies. I am saying this because in the reports that were submitted by the city, I read them, I went through them twice or three times. Most of the times, the reports just reference outside documents, or they say things like, This is going to be done by complying with the Constitution, which is obvious, but we need to know how. They cannot reference outside documents. They just have to explain when they answer the questions. If the question is, what are the data practices, how they are preventing the access by third parties, for example, they cannot say, we are going to comply with the policy. They will have to explain in the reports how are they complying. If they have to repeat the provision of the policy, that's okay, but we need these reports to be complete because that's the way that people can actually read them without having to go back to another document. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And that will conclude in-person public testimony, and I believe we do have a request remotely, and it's Will Justice. So we can admit Will Justice to offer public testimony via Zoom.
All right. So, I'm here to talk about BRIC. Can y'all hear me?
You gotcha.
All right, then. So I'm here to talk about BRIC. I actually have a BRIC report on me. BRIC has affected my life very, it's been very bad for me. I've been kicked out of places because I've had task force tell the people that I was living with that I was a dangerous person. I've had charges that have been dropped against me, put on public, like it's been in the police officers, like in their mailbox, it's come and it has my picture on it, all these charges that have been dropped on me, very inflammatory things, talk about like how I've made threats, and it's like, okay, so I know the law. If I actually made a threat, you would arrest me. And then that would be, you know, me in jail. So when it comes down to, you may disagree with what I said because you don't agree that it's okay for me to say that it's not okay for you to do certain things that you're not supposed to be doing. I mean, I got to break that down. So if I say that there's a problem with your behavior and you don't like that, but you have the authority to just lock me up and then say, I assaulted you after you've assaulted me, that's a problem. Let's call things what it is. I'm very ashamed that we have people who are willing to get up there knowing our history with the police department, and it's like y'all are willing to be willing tokens and come up here and say whatever to sit there and justify this stuff that has affected me since I've been a teenager, like even before that, because my first interaction with police was not a positive one. We are not changing this situation. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. And the only problem, the thing is now that it just, more people who look like me is the ones are able to abuse me too. I mean, and let's call it what it is. I'm seeing less and less people who actually look like me in my community. This whole thing about community policing and all this stuff like that. I mean, I got to call BS on that. We don't see you. You're lying. I'm going to say that straight up and down. You're lying. You're not coming into the community and talking to us and actually, like, you know, engaging with us in a positive way whatsoever. The majority of people who are policing my community do not look like me. They have biases, implicit biases that are, you know, it's been in their head since they were a child, and it's kind of hard to let go of. I can't tell you how many times I've had instances. Just the other day, I got pulled over by the police. They trying to talk to me like they're familiar with me, and they're lying to my face, telling me about how I was speeding. And I'm like, you're a liar, like real deal. You're sitting here lying to me right now, and it's kind of clear that you already know who I am. And they're trying to play it like they don't, because this publication has went out there with all these charges that have been dismissed on me to their homes, telling them to look out for me because I'm a dangerous person. I'm active in my community trying to do the positive things. And you're sitting there telling people that, oh, I'm just somebody to look out for. If it was that serious, it makes no sense whatsoever. I've been denied employment because of this. I've had other people harassed because of this, because, I mean, they associate with me and they're like, hold on, who are these people who are coming to me talking about something probably shouldn't deal with him because, you know, it's like this BRIC thing is a far more nefarious than y'all would like to admit. I'd like to come and see Brick. How do I get off of that? You can't retract what's in the minds of people now because of the slander that you've put out there of me, all right, personally. And I'm just gonna say it straight up and down. There's a reason why a lot of us don't trust law enforcement. It's because we've been abused by them. I've been wrongfully convicted on things. Come on now, let's talk about the real issues. And I am tired. I am so tired of you sycophants. Like you are just like, you know, some of the stuff that you've been through. Even with I have family members that was told that they should get used to being called racial slurs and not to react to them because that's their job. Meanwhile, the racist who hates me may not call me a racial slur, but definitely treat me like one. I mean, and this is a very big issue that you guys are not addressing. It needs to be addressed. Big problems. We're not letting up on this. I don't know if my time is up or not, but I'll tell you this. You will be seeing more of me telling you that this is not a positive thing. Because like I have been negatively affected by this Brick report thing that I made public. I mean, you can go and look at it. It has all these charges on it that don't even exist. They said that they have no merit. I mean, it happens. It happens because wrongfully accused equals guilty when you look like me. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Will. And you're bringing us right out. We have a hard stop at 1 o'clock, so you finished right in perfect time. Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention. Obviously, the administration, our advocates, public testimony from via Zoom, as well as in-person testimony, and also to my colleagues for their thoughtful comments and questions. And with respect to docket 0921, the surveillance policies of the Boston Police Department, Boston Parks Department, Park Rangers, Boston Public Schools, Boston Public Health Commission, Boston Housing Authority, Boston Municipal Protection Services, and the Office of Emergency Management, this meeting of the Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice is adjourned. Thank you.